the alpha who chose wrong, and the woman who made him regret it. Tonight, under a moon that decides destiny, Elara Viral will watch her entire future die. The man she's loved since childhood will reject her in front of everyone, choosing another woman, another life, another fate. But here's what her former pack doesn't know. The enemy alpha watching from the shadows isn't offering sympathy. He's offering war. And when Elara takes his hand and walks into enemy territory, she'll ignite a conflict that will burn down everything both packs have ever known. Stay until the end to see how she makes them all pay. Drop a comment with your city. Let's see where this fire spreads. The cathedral ceiling stretched like frozen lightning overhead, every silver branch woven tight enough to trap moonlight and hold it prisoner. Elara Viral stood in the center of it all, feeling the weight of 200 eyes on her skin like brands. The claiming moon hung fat and white through the skylight, and she wore the ceremonial white dress they'd laced her into at dawn, silk that whispered against her legs, a collar of moonflowers that made her throat itch, hair braided with silver thread until it pulled at her scalp. She looked like a bride already chosen. She was supposed to be. "Steady," her mother had whispered that morning, fingers working the laces at Elara's spine. "You've prepared for this your whole life. When Darian claims you, when the bond snaps into place, you'll finally understand what it means to be complete." Elara had nodded, throat too tight for words. She'd felt the pre-bond with Darian Thorne since they were 14, that gossamer thread between souls that promised eventual completion. Every alpha heir felt it with their destined mate, and for 6 years she'd nurtured it like a flame cupped in her palms. Darian had felt it too. He'd told her so 1,000 times, in stolen moments between training sessions, in letters when his duties took him away, in the way his hand always found hers in crowded rooms. Tonight was supposed to make it permanent. Tonight, under the claiming moon, the pre-bond would either ignite into the full mating bond, or it would shatter forever. There was no third option. Around her, the ceremony hall thrummed with whispered conversations and barely contained anticipation. The entire Silver Peak pack had gathered, warriors in their formal grays, elders draped in moon silver, children too young to understand but old enough to sense the electricity crackling through the air. At the front, on the raised dais, sat Alpha Marcus Thorne and his Luna, faces carved from the same expectant stone as everyone else's. And beside them, dressed in alpha black with silver threading at his collar and cuffs, stood Darian. Elara's breath caught. He looked like everything she'd ever wanted. Sharp jaw, dark hair swept back, eyes the color of storm clouds over mountains. Tall enough to make her feel protected, strong enough to lead their pack into the next generation, beautiful enough to make her 14-year-old self fall stupid and hard. He wasn't looking at her yet, his attention fixed somewhere in the middle distance, face composed, breathing steady. But he would look. Any moment now, the ceremony would begin, and he'd turn those gray eyes on her, and everything would finally click into place. The claiming moon reaches its apex. The elder's voice cut through the murmurs, ancient and rough as tree bark. "We gather tonight to witness destiny, to watch the bond between alpha and mate forge itself under sacred light, to see our future secured." The crowd fell silent. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she wondered if people could see it moving beneath the silk. Her hands trembled at her sides. She forced them still. "Alpha Heir Darian Thorne," the elder turned to him. "Step forward and claim your mate." This was it. Darian moved, fluid, controlled, every inch the alpha he'd been trained to become. He descended the dais steps, boots silent on marble, and Elara felt the pre-bond between them flutter like a bird's wings against her chest. Recognition. Anticipation. She took a breath and prepared to step forward, prepared to meet him halfway like they'd practiced, prepared to... Darian walked past her. The world tilted. Elara's foot, already raised, froze mid-step. Her breath stopped. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel, and at the end of that tunnel was Darian's back, moving away from her, moving toward... No. He stopped in front of Sarah Blackwood, a beta's daughter. Pretty in a soft, conventional way, with golden hair and doe eyes and absolutely no claim to an alpha bond. She stood near the eastern wall, shock blooming across her face like blood in water. "I claim you," Darian said, voice steady as stone, "under the claiming moon, before our pack, before the gods themselves. I claim Sarah Blackwood as my mate." The bond slammed into place between them. Alara could feel the shockwave of it roll across the room, could see the way Sarah's knees buckled and Darian caught her, could watch the pre-bond she'd felt with him for 6 years just vanish. Not shatter, not break, just disappear, like it had never existed at all. Like it had been nothing but a lie her soul told itself. Someone gasped, then another. Then the entire hall erupted into chaos. What? Did he just... But Alara was supposed to... The pre-bond I thought they had... Alara stood frozen in her white dress, moonflowers wilting at her throat, silver thread pulling at her scalp, surrounded by 200 people watching her entire future die in real time. Her hands had gone numb. Her chest felt cracked open. She couldn't breathe right. Each inhale came shallow and wrong, like her lungs had forgotten their purpose. Darian turned then, Sarah tucked against his side, her hand pressed to her heart like she couldn't quite believe what was happening. His storm cloud eyes found Alara's across the space between them, and there was nothing. No regret. No apology. Just a clean, clinical distance that told her everything she needed to know. This hadn't been impulse. This had been decided, planned. He'd known he was going to do this, and he'd let her stand there anyway, dressed like his bride, waiting like a fool. Alara! Her mother's hand landed on her shoulder, gripped too tight, voice pitched low and urgent. Alara, breathe, just breathe. We'll figure this out. We'll... Get away from me. The words came out flat, dead. Sweetheart, please, don't touch me. Alara stepped away from her mother's hand, away from the crowd pressing in with their pity and their shock and their rabid curiosity. Her legs moved on instinct, muscle memory carrying her when her brain had gone static and white. She had to get out. The crowd parted for her. Of course it did. They were probably terrified she'd collapse, scream, make a scene. Alara Varel, the almost Luna, rejected under the claiming moon in front of everyone who mattered. Poor thing. Humiliated thing. Broken thing. She walked, head high, spine straight, hands loose at her sides even though she wanted to curl them into fists and break something. The ceremonial hall's massive doors stood open to the courtyard beyond, and Alara moved toward them like a woman walking toward her own execution, composed, hollow, already dead inside. No one stopped her. She made it through the doors, made it down the marble steps, made it across the moonlit courtyard to the fountain at its center before her legs finally gave out. Alara caught herself on the fountain's edge, fingers gripping stone so hard her knuckles went white. Her reflection stared up from the water, pale face, dark eyes, moonflowers hanging limp, silver thread catching the light. She looked like a ghost. She felt like one. Fuck! The word ripped out of her, ugly and raw. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Interesting vocabulary for a rejected bride. Alara's head snapped up. A man stood at the courtyard's northern edge, half in shadow, moonlight cutting across his features in sharp relief. Tall. Taller than Darian by at least 2 inches. Broader through the shoulders. Hair dark as pitch and eyes darker, watching her with an intensity that made her wolf stir uneasily beneath her skin. She knew that face. Everyone in Silver Peak knew that face. Riven Kael, Alpha of Draverin, leader of their oldest, bitterest enemy. What the fuck are you doing here? Alara's voice came out hoarse. She didn't move from the fountain, didn't straighten, didn't bother pretending she was anything other than shattered. This is Silver Peak territory. You cross our borders during a claiming moon ceremony, and you're asking for war. I'm here under truce. Riven stepped forward, and the movement was predatory. Controlled, deliberate, every muscle coiled and ready. Your alpha invited me, political courtesy between packs. Although... His gaze swept over her, taking in the white dress, the wilting flowers, the way she was gripping the fountain like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I'm starting to think the invitation had a different purpose. Alara's stomach turned to ice. What? Did you really not know? Riven moved closer, boots silent on stone. Darian Thorne has been negotiating with my pack for months. Trade agreements, territory disputes. He wanted to prove himself capable before taking over as alpha. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the way his jaw flexed when he spoke. Part of those negotiations involved removing obstacles to his leadership. The words took a moment to land. When they did, Alara felt something crack open in her chest, something hot and vicious that tasted like rage. Obstacles. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You're saying he rejected me because I was an obstacle? You're the strongest wolf in your generation, Riven said simply. Smart, capable, born from a bloodline nearly as powerful as his own. If he'd bonded with you, you would have been his equal, in strength, in influence, in pack standing. He needed someone softer, someone who'd defer to him, someone who'd make him look strong instead of sharing that strength. Sarah, beta-born, gentle, trained in healing and hospitality instead of combat. The perfect Luna to stand behind her alpha, never beside him. He used me. Alara's hand started shaking. He felt the pre-bond, told me we were fated. Let me believe. Her voice cracked. He used me to keep me compliant until he found someone better suited to his ambitions. Yes. And you knew. Alara's eyes snapped to Riven's, fury igniting like kindling. You negotiated with him. You helped him plan this. You're just as culpable, you piece of I told him it was a mistake. Riven's voice cut through hers, cold and sharp. I told him rejecting you would create an enemy more dangerous than any alliance could counter. I told him you'd burn his pack to ash before you let this go. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. He didn't listen. Alara stared at him, chest heaving, vision swimming with tears she refused to let fall. Behind her, inside the ceremonial hall, she could hear the murmur of voices rising again, shock giving way to gossip, gossip giving way to speculation about what she'd do next. They expected her to cry, to break, to slink away in shame and spend the next decade rebuilding her shattered reputation, while Darian and Sarah lived the life that was supposed to be hers. What do you want? Alara's voice came out raw. You didn't stay here just to watch me fall apart. No. Riven took another step closer, and this time Alara didn't back away. I stayed to make you an offer. I don't want your pity. Good, because I'm not offering it. His dark eyes held hers, unflinching. I'm offering you power, territory, a position that will make Darian Thorne choke on his regret every time he hears your name. Alara's breath caught. What are you talking about? Marry me. The words dropped between them like stones into still water. Bond with me. Become Luna of Dravarin and co-alpha of the most feared pack in the territories. Show Silver Peak exactly what they threw away. For a moment, Alara couldn't process the words. They sat in her ears like a foreign language, incomprehensible. You want me to... You're asking me to marry you. Right now. After... She gestured vaguely at herself, at the fountain, at the disaster behind her. After all this, I'm asking you to choose yourself. Riven's voice dropped lower, intimate despite the distance still between them. I'm asking you to take the life you were supposed to have and remake it into something bigger, something that belongs to you, not to the man who threw you away. We're enemies, Alara said weakly. Our packs have been at each other's throats for generations. You expect me to just... I expect you to be smart enough to recognize an opportunity. Riven tilted his head slightly, studying her. You have two choices, Alara Varel. You can go back inside that hall, paste on a brave face, and spend the rest of your life watching Darian build the future you were promised. Or you can come with me. Cross into Dravarin territory. Take a crown without love, yes, but take it anyway. Make it yours. Make him regret ever thinking you were disposable. Alara's throat worked. Her hands were still shaking. Every logical part of her brain was screaming that this was insane, that bonding with Riven Kale meant betraying everything she'd ever known, that her pack would consider her a traitor, that her family would... Her family. Her mother, who'd laced her into this dress and told her to be steady. Her father, who taught her to fight but never to lead. Her former friends, who were probably inside right now whispering about her humiliation, already choosing Sarah's side because that's where the power was. What had loyalty gotten her? What had love gotten her? Nothing but ash in her mouth and a white dress that made her look like a corpse. It would be political, Alara heard herself say. The bond. You're not offering me romance, you're offering me a throne. I'm offering you exactly what you want, what you've always wanted. Power, recognition, a mate who won't betray you the moment something shinier comes along. Riven extended his hand, palm up, an invitation. I won't love you, Alara. I can't. But I won't humiliate you either. I won't use you. I won't throw you away when you become inconvenient. It wasn't a love story. It was a business transaction, a hostile takeover of her own destiny. Elara looked at his hand. Broad palm, long fingers, calluses that spoke of weapons training and hard labor. She looked past him, toward the northern border where Dravaran territory waited in shadow. She looked back at the ceremonial hall, where Darian was probably still standing with Sarah tucked against his side, where her mother was probably wringing her hands, where 200 people were probably placing bets on how long until she came crawling back. She thought about the pre-bond that had vanished like smoke, about 6 years of promises that had turned out to be lies, about the future she'd built in her head, brick by brick, only to watch it collapse in a single moment. Fuck them. Fuck all of them. Elara reached out and took Riven's hand. His fingers closed around hers, firm, warm, real. The touch sent a shock up her arm, wolf to wolf, power recognizing power. No pre-bond snapped into place, no destiny clicked into alignment, but she felt something anyway. Potential. A doorway opening. A path forward that didn't require her to be small or sorry or broken. Okay, Elara said, voice steadier than she'd felt in hours. Let's burn it all down. Riven's mouth curved into a real smile this time, sharp and dangerous and absolutely deadly. There she is. He pulled her forward, away from the fountain, away from the hall, away from everything she'd ever known. Elara went willingly, white dress trailing behind her like a flag of surrender, and her spine straight as a blade. She didn't look back. The journey to Dravaran took 3 hours through territory Elara had never seen. Riven led her through forest paths that wound between ancient trees, across streams that ran black under moonlight, past border markers carved with warnings in languages she couldn't read. He didn't speak much, just kept one hand wrapped around hers, pace steady, breathing even. Alara's mind raced the entire time. What had she done? What was she doing? She'd just accepted a marriage proposal from her pack's enemy, agreed to bond with a man she barely knew, committed herself to a life in hostile territory where everyone would view her as a traitor and a threat. But every time panic tried to claw its way up her throat, she remembered Darian's face, the clinical distance in his eyes, the way he'd walked past her like she was furniture. The rage kept her moving forward. Dawn was breaking when they reached Dravaran's fortress, a massive structure of black stone and iron gates, built into the mountainside like something grown rather than constructed. Torches burned at intervals along the walls, casting orange light across battlements where guards watched their approach with hands on weapons. "That's our Luna?" one of them called down, voice sharp with disbelief. "You brought back Silver Peak's reject?" Alara's jaw clenched. "That's your future co-alpha," Riven called back, voice carrying effortless authority. "And the next person who calls her a reject loses their tongue. Open the gates." The gates swung open with a groan of metal and stone. Riven pulled Elara through into a courtyard significantly grimmer than Silver Peak's. All practical angles and defensive positions, no decorative fountains or moonlight gardens. Warriors training in the pre-dawn light stopped to stare. A woman carrying water buckets nearly dropped them. A child peered out from a doorway, eyes wide. They all looked at Elara like she was a threat. Good. She felt like one. Riven led her through the fortress interior, stone corridors lit by torchlight, walls hung with weapons instead of tapestries, everything built for function over beauty. They climbed stairs until Elara's legs burned, past guards who fell silent at their approach, finally emerged into what appeared to be Riven's private quarters. The door shut behind them with a heavy thud. Elara found herself in a room that matched its owner, sparse, clean, organized with military precision. A bed large enough for a wolf who needed to shift in his sleep. A desk covered in maps and documents, windows facing east toward the rising sun. "This is where you'll stay," Riven said, finally releasing her hand. "Until the bonding ceremony. After that, these quarters become ours." Ours? The word sat strange in Alara's mouth. "When?" she asked. "The ceremony. 3 days. My pack needs time to adjust to the idea of a Silver Peak Luna. You need time to—" He gestured vaguely at her dress. "Clean up. Prepare. Decide if you're actually going through with this." "I already decided." Elara lifted her chin. "I took your hand. I crossed your border. I'm here. You're in shock, Riven said bluntly. You're running on adrenaline and rage, and that's fine. Those are useful fuels. But in 3 days, when you're standing in front of my pack preparing to bond with me permanently, that fuel will be gone. You'll need something else to sustain you. Like what? Purpose. Riven moved to his desk, began sorting through documents with practiced efficiency. My pack is strong but isolated. We've been at war with Silver Peak for so long that we've cut ourselves off from potential allies, trade partners, diplomatic relationships. You have knowledge of their territory, their strategies, their leadership. You have legitimate grievances that will resonate with any wolf who's ever felt betrayed by their pack. And you have the spine to stand up in front of hostile strangers and claim what's yours. He looked up at her dark eyes, unreadable. You can be decoration, Alara. A trophy Luna who stands behind her alpha and looks pretty. Or you can be power, real, functional, terrifying power. It's your choice, but make it consciously, not because you're angry at your ex. The words hit harder than they should have. Alara felt them sink in, felt the truth beneath them. She was angry, so angry she could barely see straight. But was that enough? Was rage enough to build a life on? I don't know how to be a Luna, she admitted quietly. I prepared my whole life, but it was always supposed to be at Silver Peak, with Darien. I don't know your customs, your politics, your... Then learn, Riven's voice was matter of fact. You're smart. You'll adapt. And I'll help you, not out of kindness, but because a strong Luna makes me a stronger alpha. We succeed together, or we fail together. Alara looked down at her hands. They'd stopped shaking sometime during the journey. Her fingers were dirty from the forest path, nails broken, the ceremonial henna smudged beyond recognition. She still wore the white dress, though it was torn now at the hem, stained with mud and crushed leaves. She looked like a disaster. She felt like a weapon waiting to be aimed. Okay, Alara said. Teach me. The next 3 days were brutal. Riven woke her before dawn and ran her through Draveren's hierarchy, pack structure, key families, political alliances, old grudges that ran deeper than bloodlines. He introduced her to his beta, a scarred woman named Kira, who looked at Alara like she was a puzzle that needed solving, and his head warrior, a massive man called Torvon, who didn't bother hiding his skepticism. She's Silver Peak, Torvon said flatly, standing in Riven's strategy room with arms crossed. You really expect us to bow to their cast-off? I expect you to bow to your Luna, Riven replied, voice cold enough to frost glass. Whether she came from Silver Peak, the moon itself, or the bottom of the ocean is irrelevant. She accepted my claim. That makes her yours to protect. Protect? Torvin's laugh was ugly. More like guard. Make sure she's not feeding information back to I'm right here. Alara stepped forward, forcing herself not to flinch under Torvon's hostile stare. You want to question my loyalty? Fine, but do it to my face, not around me like I'm furniture. Something shifted in Torvon's expression. Surprise, maybe, or grudging respect. What guarantee do we have that you won't turn on us the first chance you get? None. Alara met his eyes, except that Silver Peak threw me away, and Draverian gave me a crown. Where exactly do you think my incentives lie? Silence. Then Kira laughed, a short, sharp sound. I like her. You'll like her less when she's ordering you around, Torvon muttered, but some of the hostility had drained from his posture. The days blurred together. Training sessions where Alara learned Draverin's combat styles, more brutal than Silver Peak's, less refined, built for survival instead of sport. Meals in the common hall where warriors watched her with suspicion and children whispered behind their hands. Nights in Riven's quarters where she collapsed into bed too exhausted to dream. Riven was complicated. He didn't touch her beyond what was necessary. A hand at her elbow during formal introductions, a steadying grip when she stumbled on rough terrain. He explained things with patience that surprised her, answered questions without condescension, corrected mistakes without mockery. But he kept distance between them like a physical barrier, never allowing conversations to drift into anything personal, never sharing anything of himself beyond tactical information. It should have been a relief. This was a political arrangement after all, no emotions required. But sometimes Alara caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't name, something careful, something guarded, like he was waiting for her to either break or catch fire. She refused to do either. On the third day, hours before the bonding ceremony, Kira helped her dress. Not white this time, the beta said, pulling out a gown of deep crimson and black. Dravaran brides wear blood colors, power colors. Alara ran her fingers over the fabric, heavier than silk, textured like armor. Your pack really thinks I'm going to betray them. Most of them, yes. Kira's hands were efficient, lacing the dress with practiced movements. They've seen too many political marriages turn into political disasters. And Silver Peak has been our enemy for 3 generations. Trust isn't something we give easily. What about you? Kira paused, considering. I think you're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most self-destructive. Possibly both. She pulled the final lace tight. But Riven chose you, and Riven doesn't make stupid choices, so I'm reserving judgment. Comforting? I'm not here to comfort you. Kira stepped back, assessing. I'm here to make sure you don't get yourself killed. Now look. She turned Alara toward a mirror. The woman staring back was almost unrecognizable. The dress hugged her frame like a second skin, crimson bleeding into black at the edges, cut to emphasize strength instead of softness. Her hair was loose, dark waves falling past her shoulders. No flowers this time, no silver thread. Just her face, sharper than it had been 3 days ago, eyes harder, mouth set in a line that promised violence to anyone who tested her. She looked like a Luna. She looked dangerous. Good, Kira said quietly. Now let's go claim what's yours. The bonding ceremony took place in Dravaran's Great Hall, a cavernous space lit by braziers, packed with wolves in formal dress who fell silent when Alara entered. She felt their eyes like pressure against her skin, felt their judgment, their skepticism, their hostility. She kept her spine straight and walked toward the dais where Riven waited. He wore black on black, silver threading at his collar catching the firelight. His dark eyes tracked her approach with that same guarded intensity, and when she reached him, he extended his hand. Alara took it. The hall remained silent as the elder stepped forward, a different elder than Silverpeak's, this one with scars running down both arms and a voice like gravel. We gather tonight to witness a bond forged in choice, not destiny, the elder said. Alpha Riven Kale has chosen Alara Virel as his mate and co-alpha. Do any challenge this claim? Alara's heart hammered. This was the moment. If anyone in Dravaran was going to object, was going to call her a spy or a traitor or unfit, this was when they'd... Silence. No one spoke. The elder nodded, satisfied. Then let the bond be sealed. Riven pulled Alara closer, and for the first time since that night in Silver Peak's courtyard, she felt something, a flutter in her chest, recognition sparking between them. Not the pre-bond she'd felt with Darian, something different, darker, stranger. This is permanent, Riven said quietly, meant only for her. Once the bond takes, there's no breaking it. Last chance to run. Alara looked up at him, at this man who was offering her power instead of love, alliance instead of affection, a crown forged in defiance instead of destiny. I'm not running, she said. Riven's mouth curved slightly. Then he bit down on his own palm, drawing blood, and extended it to her. Alara did the same, teeth-breaking skin, blood welling hot and red. She pressed her bleeding palm to his. The bond hit like lightning. Alara gasped, knees buckling, Riven's arm wrapping around her waist, the only thing keeping her upright. She could feel him, not just physically, but deeper. Soul to soul, power to power, his strength pouring into her veins, her fire flooding into his, the two of them tangling together until she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. But underneath it all, beneath the raw power and connection, she felt something else. Cold. Not the cold of winter or snow or ice. This was different, unnatural, like something frozen deep in Riven's chest where warmth should be, something locked away so tightly that even the bond couldn't quite touch it. His soul wasn't cold. It was frozen. Alara's eyes flew open, meeting Riven's. For just a moment, she saw something flash across his face. Surprise, maybe fear, something quickly hidden behind his usual control. Then it was gone. The bond settled into place, permanent and absolute. The hall erupted into formal acknowledgement. Not cheers, but the rhythmic stamping of feet against stone that Dravaran wolves used to signal acceptance. Alara was Luna now, co-alpha. permanently bound to a man whose soul felt like winter locked in chains. "What did you do?" she whispered against his chest, still pressed close, still feeling that unnatural cold threading through their bond. Riven's arm tightened around her waist. "What I had to," he said quietly. "Same as you." Then he stepped back, released her, turned to face his pack with the same controlled authority he always wore. "You're Luna," he announced. "My mate. Anyone who questions her answers to me." The stamping intensified. Acceptance. Agreement. But Alara barely heard it. She was too focused on the bond humming in her chest, on the cold she could feel beneath Riven's skin, on the sudden, horrible certainty that she'd just tied herself permanently to a man with secrets that might destroy them both. The celebration, if it could be called that, lasted hours. Formal acknowledgments from pack families, toasts that tasted more like warnings, Kira staying close, a silent guardian, while Torvon watched from across the room with suspicion that hadn't quite faded. Alara smiled until her face hurt, accepted congratulations that rang hollow, played the part of confident Luna while her mind raced. What was wrong with Riven? What was that cold she'd felt? Why did his soul feel like something locked away deliberately, frozen to prevent what? Feeling? Connection? "You're thinking too loud," Riven murmured, appearing at her elbow with a cup of something that smelled like pine and smoke. "Drink. It'll help." Alara took the cup but didn't drink. "What happened to you?" "That's not a conversation for our bonding celebration." "When then?" Riven's jaw flexed. Around them, the celebration continued, music starting up, wolves beginning to dance, the atmosphere slowly shifting from hostile to merely wary. "Later, when we're alone." "We're bonded now," Alar said quietly. "Permanently. I can feel something wrong in you, Riven. I can feel it through our connection. So either tell me what it is, or I'm going to assume the worst." For a long moment, he didn't answer. Just stood there, cup in hand, watching the celebration with eyes that saw something else entirely. Then, "Not here." He took her hand. Still strange, still new, this casual touch that now meant permanent connection, and led her out of the great hall. Through corridors she was starting to recognize. Upstairs she'd climbed a dozen times, back to the quarters that were now officially theirs. The door closed. Silence fell. Riven moved to the windows, staring out at Dravaran territory spread beneath them in moonlight and shadow. "I didn't want to bond with anyone," he said finally. "For good reason." Alara waited. "My bloodline carries a curse." The words came out flat, clinical. Cast generations ago by someone we wronged. Winter magic, woven into our very souls. The more we feel, the more we love, the more the curse consumes us. It turns emotion into ice. Literally. Alara's breath caught. "What?" "My father loved my mother desperately. The curse took him when I was 12, froze him from the inside out until there was nothing left but ice and death." Riven's hands curled into fists against the window ledge. "I've spent my entire life learning to control it, to feel nothing, to keep the cold locked away where it can't spread." "But you bonded with me." Alara moved closer, mind reeling. "You chose to create a permanent connection despite knowing I chose you because I thought I could never love you." Riven turned and his eyes were devastated. "You were Silver Peak's reject, a political arrangement, a practical alliance. I thought I could keep you at distance, could maintain control, could prevent the curse from ever taking hold because what I felt for you would never be real." The words hit like a physical blow, but I was wrong. Riven's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I've been wrong from the moment you took my hand in that courtyard. You're not just political. You're not just practical. You're—" He cut himself off, but Alara heard what he didn't say. "You're already under my skin." "How long?" she asked quietly. "How long before the curse takes you?" "I don't know. My father lasted 15 years after bonding with my mother, but he loved her from the start. I'm trying not to feel anything for you at all, which means—" Riven spread his hands helplessly. "Maybe never. Maybe tomorrow. The curse responds to emotion, not logic." Alara sank onto the edge of the bed, mind racing. "So we're bonded, permanently, and if you develop any real feelings for me, you'll freeze to death." "Yes. And you didn't think to mention this before we made it permanent?" Would it have changed your answer? Riven's eyes held hers. Would you have chosen differently? Alara opened her mouth to say yes. Obviously, what kind of question was that? But she stopped, because she remembered standing in Silver Peak's courtyard, watching Darian choose another woman. Remembered the rage, the humiliation, the bone-deep certainty that she would rather die than go back inside that hall and face their pity. Would she have chosen differently, knowing Riven was cursed? I don't know, she admitted quietly. Well, Riven's mouth twisted into something bitter. Now you don't have a choice. We're bound, permanently. So we make it work. As a political alliance, as co-alphas, as anything except what causes the curse to activate. Which means never falling in love. Which means never falling in love. They stared at each other across the room. Two people tied together by choice and circumstance, and a bond neither of them had fully understood when they'd forged it. I'm sorry, Riven said finally. I should have told you before. I should have... Stop. Alara stood, crossing to him. You're right. I probably would have accepted anyway. And now that we're here... She took a breath. We work with what we have. You teach me to be Luna. I help you lead your pack. We maintain distance. We survive. You're remarkably calm about this. I'm remarkably good at compartmentalizing. Alara managed a smile that felt like broken glass. Besides, I just bound myself to my pack's enemy out of spite. Finding out my new mate is cursed is almost on brand at this point. Riven huffed a sound that might have been a laugh if it had contained any humor. We're quite the pair. The worst, Alara agreed. They stood there as the celebration continued below, as their packs processed this new alliance. As the bond between them hummed with potential and danger in equal measure, Alara could feel the cold in him even now, that frozen core where warmth should be. Could feel him holding himself back, maintaining iron control over emotions that might kill him if he let them loose. And she realized, with a sick sort of clarity, that she'd traded one impossible situation for another. With Darian, she would have spent her life being less than she was. Smaller, quieter, perpetually second to his ambitions. With Riven, she could be everything she was capable of being, but only if she never allowed either of them to feel anything real. Power without love. Strength without softness. It should have been enough. It had to be enough. Because the alternative, the curse taking him, losing this bond she'd barely begun to understand, was unthinkable. We should sleep, Riven said finally. Tomorrow, you start formally leading. The pack will test you. I'm ready? I know you are. He moved to the far side of the bed, and Alara took the near side, both of them lying down fully clothed, maintaining careful space between them. The bond whispered in her chest, awareness of him just inches away, but neither moved closer. This was their life now. This was what they'd chosen. Alara closed her eyes and tried not to think about Darian, about the future she'd lost, about the cold threading through Riven's veins and what it would feel like if it consumed him completely. Tried not to think about the fact that she'd escaped one cage only to build another. But sleep wouldn't come. And in the darkness, she felt Riven's breathing change, felt through the bond that he was awake too, lying there in rigid control, holding back everything that might kill him. Two broken people tied together by choice and desperation, and a bond that promised either salvation or destruction. Alara wondered which one they'd get. She was still wondering when dawn broke through the windows, painting Dravarin in shades of gray and gold, and Riven rose without a word to begin another day of practiced distance. Their first day as true mates. Their first day of survival. 3 days later, a messenger arrived from Silver Peak. Alpha Darian Thorn demands the return of Alara Varel. He's claiming kidnapping. He's threatening war. And standing in Dravarin's strategy room with Riven's cold flooding through their bond and rage burning in her chest, Alara smiled. Let him come. The messenger stood in the center of Dravarin's strategy room, mud-splattered and breathing hard, letter clutched in one shaking hand. Young. Maybe 19, 20 at most. His scent carried Silver Peak all over it, pine and clean water, completely wrong for Dravarin's iron and smoke. Alara watched him from her position beside Riven's chair, arms crossed, face carefully blank. She could feel eyes on her, Kira to her left, Torvon near the door. A half-dozen other high-ranking wolves scattered around the room, all of them watching to see how she'd react, all of them waiting for her to break. "Read it," Riven said, voice flat. The messenger's hands trembled as he unfolded the letter. "Alpha Darian Thorn of Silver Peak demands the immediate return of Alara Varel. He claims—" The kid's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. "He claims she was taken under duress during a moment of emotional distress, and thus the bond is invalid. He's prepared to negotiate terms for her safe return. If Dravarin refuses, he will consider it an act of war and respond accordingly." Silence dropped like a stone. Alara's jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. Emotional distress. Like she'd been some hysterical child who couldn't make her own choices. Like she hadn't walked out of that courtyard on her own 2 feet, taken Riven's hand willingly, crossed the border knowing exactly what it meant. "Negotiate terms," Kira said, voice dripping acid. "He wants to negotiate for property he threw away 3 weeks ago. That's rich. It's strategy." Torvin's rumble cut across the room. "He's framing it as a rescue. Makes him look honorable. Makes us look like kidnappers. Puts political pressure on our allies to support his claim." "We don't have allies," someone muttered. "Exactly. Which means he can spin whatever story he wants and no one will contradict him." Riven hadn't moved, hadn't spoken since ordering the letter read. He sat perfectly still in his chair, fingers steepled, dark eyes fixed on the messenger with an intensity that made the kid's knees visibly shake. Through the bond, Alara felt cold, that unnatural frost threading deeper, spreading like ice across water. Riven was angry, furiously, violently angry, but his face showed nothing. "Tell me," Riven said quietly, "did Alpha Thorn send you alone, or are there others waiting at the border?" The messenger swallowed. "Others, Alpha. A diplomatic envoy. 20 wolves. They're camped at the northern marker, waiting for your response." 20 wolves. Riven's mouth curved into something that wasn't a smile. How restrained of him. "It's a show of force," Kira said. "Not enough to be an actual threat, but enough to make a point. He's testing our response. He's hoping we'll refuse and give him justification for escalation," Torvon added. "Then he gets to play the wrong party defending his pack's honor." Alara's hands curled into fists at her sides. She could see it playing out. Darian positioning himself as the noble alpha trying to rescue his former mate from enemy clutches, building sympathy among neutral packs, creating a narrative where Dravarin was the villain and Silverpeak the victim. And she was the prize, the damsel, the poor confused girl who couldn't possibly have chosen this herself. "He's not getting me back." The words came out harder than Alara intended, sharp enough to cut. "I don't care what story he's selling or how many wolves he brings to your border. I'm not going back to Silverpeak." Every eye in the room turned to her. "No one's suggesting you should," Kira said carefully. "Aren't they?" Alara's gaze swept the room, catching skeptical expressions, calculating looks. "Half of you still think I'm a spy. The other half think I'm a liability. Darian showing up with demands just confirms what you've been thinking since I got here, that I'm more trouble than I'm worth." "Alara," Riven started. "Don't." She cut him off, stepping forward. "Let's be honest about what's happening. Darian rejected me and I came here. Now he wants me back, not because he's had some great revelation, not because he realizes he made a mistake. He wants me back because I chose you over him, and his ego can't handle it. You think this is about ego?" Torvin's voice carried an edge. "This is about territory. About power. He's using you as an excuse to put pressure on us, to test our defenses, to see if we'll fold." "I know that," Alara met his stare. "Which is exactly why sending me back would be the worst possible move. It would prove that Dravarin buckles under Silver Peak pressure, that your alpha can be manipulated through threats, that the bond we just sealed in front of your entire pack means nothing. It also avoids war," someone said from the back. "There's always going to be a reason to avoid war," Alara shot back. "Always going to be some excuse to take the easy path. But if you think sending me back will satisfy Darian, you're delusional. He'll just see weakness and push harder." "She's right." Riven stood and the room immediately quieted. "Thorn isn't looking for peace. He's looking for capitulation. And the moment we give it to him, we lose any leverage we have. So we refuse," Kira said. "We tell the envoy that Alara is Luna of Dravarin, bonded by choice, and Silver Peak has no claim on her. And then what? Torvin demanded. They declare war. We're strong, but we're not invincible. We can't afford a prolonged conflict with Silver Peak, not when our resources are already stretched thin from the northern border disputes. Then we make them not want to fight. Riven's voice dropped, cold and precise. We make the cost of war higher than the cost of acceptance. Silence. What are you suggesting? Kira asked slowly. Riven turned to the messenger. You'll deliver my response personally. Tell Alpha Thorn that his request is denied. Elara Virel is Luna of Dravarin by her own choice, sealed under a legitimate bond. Any attempt to reclaim her will be treated as an act of war against my pack and my mate. His eyes glinted. And tell him that if he truly believes she was taken under duress, he's welcome to ask her himself. We'll arrange a meeting, neutral territory. He can make his case directly. The messenger's face went pale. A meeting? Between you and... between him and Elara. Riven's gaze shifted to her. If Thorn wants to question her choices, he can do it to her face. Let's see how well his emotional distress narrative holds up when she tells him to fuck off in front of witnesses. Alara's breath caught. Through the bond, she felt Riven's calculation, the way he was turning Darian's own strategy against him. If Darian accepted the meeting, he'd have to face Elara directly, and everyone present would see that she wasn't some helpless victim. If he refused, he'd look like a coward hiding behind diplomatic channels. Either way, Silver Peak lost. That's a risk, Torvin said. What if Thorn tries something? An ambush, an abduction? Then we'll be ready. Riven's voice carried absolute certainty. The meeting happens on our terms, at a location we control, with security we choose. If Thorn wants his dramatic confrontation, he'll have it. But it'll be the last mistake he makes. I'll do it, Elara heard herself say. I'll meet with Darian. I'll tell him exactly what I think of his demands. Riven's eyes found hers across the room. Through the bond, she felt his approval, cold and sharp, but real. Go, he told the messenger. Deliver the message. Tell Thorn he has until tomorrow sunset to accept or decline. After that, we consider his envoy's presence at our border an act of aggression. The messenger practically fled. The moment he was gone, the room erupted. This is insane. We're playing directly into his hands. If this goes wrong, we'll have war on two fronts. Enough! Riven's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The decision is made. Elara will meet with Thorn. We'll control the location, the timing, the terms. This ends tomorrow, one way or another. And if it ends in war? Someone asked. Riven's smile was cold enough to frost the windows. Then we make sure Silver Peak regrets starting it. The meeting dispersed slowly, wolves filing out with worried glances and muttered conversations. Kira lingered near the door, arms crossed. You're sure about this? She asked Elara. No, Elara said honestly, but I'm sure about what happens if I don't do it. Darian will keep pushing, keep testing, keep using me as leverage until someone cracks. And you think facing him will stop that? I think it'll call his bluff. Elara's jaw set. He's counting on me being too scared, too ashamed, too broken to stand up to him publicly. So I'm going to prove him wrong. Kira studied her for a long moment. You know he's going to try to get in your head, make you doubt yourself, remind you of what you had together. We didn't have anything together. The words came out bitter. We had a pre-bond built on lies and a future that never existed. I'm done letting him define my worth. Good, Kira pushed off the wall. Because the moment you show weakness, every wolf in that clearing will see it, including ours. She left. Elara stood alone in the strategy room, listening to her heartbeat thunder in her ears. Through the windows, she could see Dravarin territory stretching out in shades of gray and green, harsh, beautiful, hers now. You didn't have to volunteer. Riven's voice came from behind her. Elara didn't turn. Yes, I did. This is my mess, my choice to own. It's our mess now. He moved to stand beside her at the window. The bond makes it mutual. Does it? Elara glanced at him. Or are you just protecting your political investment? Something flickered across Riven's face, too fast to name, quickly controlled. Is that what you think this is? I don't know what this is. Elara gestured between them. We're bonded, permanently. But you're holding yourself so far back that sometimes I forget you're even there. Except I can't forget because I can feel you. She pressed a hand to her chest. I can feel the cold, the control, the way you're forcing yourself not to feel anything real. That's what keeps me alive. I know. Alara's voice softened slightly. I know. But it also means I have no idea what you actually think about any of this. About Darian's demands. About me facing him. About... She cut herself off. About what? About me. The admission came out quieter than intended. I don't know what you think about me, Riven, and maybe that's safer. Maybe that's what we both need. But it also makes moments like this, when I'm about to walk into a confrontation that could start a war, feel very, very lonely. Riven was quiet for a long moment. Through the bond, Alara felt the cold intensify. Felt him wrestling with something. Felt the curse lurking beneath his control like a beast waiting to strike. I think, he said finally, that you're the most terrifying person I've ever met. Alara blinked. What? You walked away from everything you knew because you refused to accept being diminished. You crossed into enemy territory and claimed a crown most people would consider a death sentence. You've spent 3 weeks learning to lead a pack that doesn't trust you, and now you're volunteering to face the man who shattered you in front of everyone who matters. Riven's dark eyes met hers. You're either the bravest person I've ever encountered or completely insane. You said that about me once before. Kira did, but I agree with her. His mouth quirked slightly. And I think Thorn has no idea what he's created. He thought throwing you away would break you. Instead, he just freed you to become something he can't control. The words settled into Alara's chest, warm against the bond's cold. Not love, not even affection, really, but respect, recognition. It was enough. It had to be enough. Tomorrow, Alara said, we'll set the meeting for tomorrow. Neutral ground. I'll face him. I'll make it clear that I'm not going back, and then we deal with whatever comes next. Riven's hand found hers, brief, controlled, already pulling away. Together. Together, Alara echoed. But as she stood there watching darkness creep across Dreverin territory, she wondered what together actually meant when one of them was slowly freezing to death and the other was still burning from rejection. She wondered if they'd survive long enough to find out. The next day dawned cold and clear, the kind of morning that promised violence. Alara dressed in fighting leathers, practical, reinforced, the deep crimson and black of Dreverin colors. No ceremonial gowns this time, no pretty lies about what this meeting actually was. This was a confrontation, a challenge, a line being drawn in blood and bone. Kira helped her strap weapons into place, a blade at her hip, another at her thigh, silver-tipped in case things went truly wrong. You won't need them, Kira said, but her hands were efficient, checking each buckle twice. Riven's bringing 30 wolves, Torvon's leading security. If Thorn tries anything, he'll be dead before he takes 2 steps. I know, Alara tested the blade's weight, but I like knowing they're there anyway. Good instinct. Kira stepped back, assessing. You look like a Luna. I look like a weapon. Same thing, in Dreverin. They met Riven in this courtyard. He wore full alpha regalia, black armor reinforced with iron, weapons strapped across his back, hair pulled back to expose the sharp angles of his face. He looked like war itself. Ready? He asked. Alara nodded. The location Riven had chosen was a clearing 2 hours north, technically neutral ground, but close enough to Dreverin's border that reinforcements could arrive quickly if needed. They traveled in formation, Alara and Riven at the center, warriors surrounding them in defensive positions. No one spoke during the journey. The only sounds were footsteps on frozen ground and the occasional rustle of wind through bare branches. Alara used the silence to prepare herself, to remember every moment of that night in Silver Peak's courtyard, every second of humiliation, every breath of rage. She fed it like kindling, letting it build until she could feel fire licking beneath her skin. By the time they reached the clearing, she was ready to burn the whole world down. Darian was already there. He stood at the clearing center with his own contingent, 20 wolves in Silver Peak silver, arrayed in a loose semicircle. Sarah was beside him, pale and uncertain, one hand clutching his arm like she might fall without it. And Darian... Alara's breath caught despite herself. He looked exactly the same, storm cloud eyes, sharp jaw. The face she'd loved since she was 14, now watching her approach with an expression she couldn't quite read. Elara. His voice carried across the clearing, familiar and wrong. Thank the gods. When I heard what happened, Stop. Elara's voice cut through his like a knife. Don't pretend this is a rescue. Don't insult both our intelligences by acting like you're here out of concern. Darian's expression flickered. You don't understand what you're... I understand perfectly. Elara stepped forward, away from Riven's protective circle. You rejected me. Publicly. In front of our entire pack. You chose another woman and left me standing there like garbage you'd thrown away. I made a mistake. Darian moved toward her, hands raised. I was under pressure from the council, from political obligations. You felt a pre-bond with me for 6 years. Elara's voice shook with fury. 6 years, Darian. You told me we were fated. You let me believe we had a future, and then you walked past me like I was nothing. I panicked. He was closer now, close enough that she could see the desperation in his eyes. I made the wrong choice, but I'm here now trying to fix it. Come back with me. We can... We can what? Elara laughed, sharp and cruel. Pretend it didn't happen? Go back to the way things were? You're already bonded to Sarah. That's permanent. There's no undoing it. The council can grant an annulment. Under extreme circumstances, no. Sarah's voice, small but firm, cut through. She stepped away from Darian, face pale but determined. No annulments. I'm not going to be thrown away like Elara was just because you changed your mind. Darian's jaw clenched. Sarah, this isn't about... It's exactly about that. Sarah's hands trembled, but she kept talking. You chose me. You bonded with me. You don't get to take it back now because it's politically inconvenient. This is more complicated than... It's really not. Elara cut in, and despite everything, she felt a flicker of respect for Sarah. You made your choice, Darian. You got exactly what you wanted. A Luna who'd defer to you, who'd make you look strong, who'd never challenge your authority. That's not what I... Then why did you reject me? Elara's voice dropped to something dangerous. Tell me the real reason, not the political pressure bullshit, not the council, the actual reason you walked past me that night. Silence dropped like a hammer. Darian stood frozen, jaw working, eyes trapped between Elara and the wolves watching from both sides. Because you scared me, he said finally. Because bonding with you would have meant sharing power instead of holding it. Because you're too strong, too capable, too much of everything I needed to not be. There it was. The truth she'd known in her bones but never heard spoken aloud. So you chose weakness instead, Elara said softly. You chose someone you could control. I chose someone who'd support me instead of competing with me. Same thing. Elara's smile was cold. And now you want me back because I became exactly what you were afraid of. I crossed into enemy territory. I bonded with an alpha stronger than you. I claimed power you can't touch, and your ego can't handle it. This isn't about ego, go. Everything with you is about ego. Elara took another step forward, and Darian actually flinched. You're not here to rescue me. You're here because watching me thrive somewhere else makes you look weak. Because every day I stand as Dravarin's Luna is another day everyone in Silver Peak remembers you threw away someone better than what you kept. Darian's face flushed. You think you're better off with him? He jerked his head toward Riven. With Dravarin? They're using you, Elara. You're a political token, a trophy to wave at Silver Peak. I'm a co-alpha, Elara interrupted. I lead beside Riven, not behind him. I make decisions that matter. I have power that's actually mine, not borrowed from a mate who might revoke it whenever I become inconvenient. He doesn't love you. Darian's voice turned desperate. Whatever bond you have, it's not real. It's not like what we had wasn't real either. Elara's voice was quiet now, deadly. It was a pre-bond built on lies and broken the moment you decided I was disposable. So don't stand there and tell me about love when you're the one who taught me it's worthless. Elara, I'm not coming back, she said flatly. Not now, not ever. You can take your demands and your envoy and your wounded pride back to Silver Peak, and you can tell them all exactly what I said. I chose Dravarin. I chose Riven. I chose myself. And if you try to force this, if you declare war over your bruised ego, I will personally make sure you regret it. Darian stared at her, chest heaving, hands clenched into fists. Around them, wolves from both packs watched in silence, some shocked, some satisfied, some calculating what this meant for the fragile peace. "You'll regret this," Darian said finally, voice low and vicious. "When Riven gets bored of his revenge trophy, when Dravarin decides you're more trouble than you're worth, when you're alone in enemy territory with no pack to return to, you'll regret choosing pride over sense." "Maybe." Alara's smile was sharp as broken glass. "But at least I'll own my mistakes. Can you say the same?" She turned her back on him, the ultimate dismissal, the clearest statement she could make, and walked back toward Riven. "Alara!" Darian's voice cracked across the clearing. "Don't walk away from me." She kept walking. "I said don't!" Darian lunged. Everything happened too fast to process individually. One moment Alara was walking away. The next Darian had her arm in a grip tight enough to bruise, spinning her around. And then Riven was there. He moved like lightning, like violence incarnate, and his hand closed around Darian's throat with enough force to lift him off his feet. "Touch her again," Riven said, voice sub-zero, "and I'll rip your spine out through your chest." Darian choked, hands scrabbling at Riven's grip. Around them, warriors from both sides drew weapons, the clearing erupting into chaos. "Stand down!" Kira's voice cut through. "Everyone stand down!" "Let him go," Sarah was saying, voice high and panicked. "Please, just let him." Riven's eyes had gone black. Not figuratively, literally black, like something cold and ancient had swallowed the color whole. And Alara could feel it through the bond, the curse rising, ice flooding through Riven's veins, the control he'd maintained for so long finally cracking under the weight of rage. "Riven." Alara put her hand on his arm. "Riven, let him go. He's not worth it." For a moment, nothing happened. Riven stood frozen, hand still wrapped around Darian's throat, eyes black as winter, the curse consuming him from the inside out. Then, slowly, his fingers opened. Darian collapsed, gasping and coughing. Sarah rushed to him, and Silver Peak's warriors surged forward. "Back!" Torvin snarled, weapons out. "One more step and we paint this clearing red." "The meeting's over," Kira said, voice hard. "Silver Peak returns to their territory. Now." "This isn't finished?" one of Darian's warriors started. "It is," Alara said quietly. She was watching Riven, watching the way he stood rigid, shaking slightly, eyes still that terrible black. "Take your alpha and leave. If you come back, we'll consider it a declaration of war." They left. Slowly, reluctantly, with backward glances and muttered threats, but they left. Sarah helped Darian to his feet, his throat already bruising, breath coming harsh, and the entire Silver Peak contingent retreated into the trees. The moment they were gone, Riven collapsed. "Get him up," Kira snapped. "Back to the fortress. Now." Torvin and another warrior hauled Riven between them. His eyes had faded from black to gray, but his skin felt like ice beneath Alara's hands, his breathing shallow and wrong. "What's happening to him?" Alara demanded, terror clawing at her chest. "The curse," Kira said grimly. "He lost control, let himself feel too much. Now it's taking its price." They ran. Through the forest, across the border, into Dravarin territory with Riven's weight dragging between them and his breath crystallizing in the air. By the time they reached the fortress, frost was spreading across his skin in delicate patterns, beautiful and deadly. They carried him to his quarters, their quarters, and laid him on the bed. His lips had gone blue. His eyes wouldn't focus. And through the bond, Alara felt the cold spreading like poison, freezing everything it touched. "Do something," she said desperately. "There has to be something." "There isn't." Kira's face was grim. "The curse runs its course. Either he fights it off, or what?" Kira didn't answer. Alara sank onto the bed beside Riven, taking his frozen hand in hers. "You can't die," she said, voice breaking. "You can't. This is just starting. You can't." His fingers twitched against hers. His eyes found her face, gray and fading. "Worth it," he whispered, voice like wind over ice. "You were worth—" He didn't finish. His eyes closed. His breathing stopped. And Alara felt through the bond as the curse locked around his heart like a fist and squeezed. "No." The word ripped out of her. "No, no, no. Riven, stay with me. Riven. But he was already gone, lost somewhere deep inside himself where even the bond couldn't reach. And sitting there with his frozen hand in hers and their barely begun future shattering around her, Alara realized with horrible clarity what she'd been trying not to feel for 3 weeks. She loved him. Despite the distance, despite the curse, despite every reason not to, she loved him. And now she was going to... Alara pressed her forehead against Riven's frozen hand and felt nothing through the bond, but empty cold. Not the controlled frost he'd maintained for weeks. This was different. This was absence, like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing there was nothing beneath but void. How long? Her voice came out raw. How long does the curse take once he's like this? Kira stood near the window, arms crossed, face carved from stone. My father lasted 3 days. Riven's grandfather made it almost a week. But they were older, stronger. Riven's been fighting this his whole life. His reserves are... She cut herself off. Tell me. Hours. Kira's jaw flexed. Maybe less. The curse feeds on emotion and what he felt when Thorn grabbed you. She shook her head. I've never seen him lose control like that. The rage, the protectiveness, the... She stopped again. Say it. Kira's eyes met hers. The fear. He was terrified of losing you. And that terror is what's killing him now. The words landed like blows. Alara looked down at Riven's face, lips blue, skin patterned with frost, chest barely moving. He looked like something carved from ice, beautiful and dead. There has to be something, Alara said desperately. Some way to break the curse, There isn't. Torvund's voice came from the doorway. He filled the frame, massive and grim. We've tried everything. Healers, shamans, every piece of folklore about winter magic we could find. The curse is blood deep. It doesn't break. It just... He gestured helplessly at Riven. So we just watch him die? Alara's voice cracked. We just sit here and we prepare for what comes next. Torvund stepped into the room. Dravarin needs an alpha. Without Riven, the pack will fracture. Other territories will see weakness and attack. We need to establish succession, reinforce defenses. He's not dead yet. Alara stood, hands clenched into fists. Don't talk about him like he's already gone. I'm talking about survival, Torvund shot back, which is what he'd want us doing instead of crying over his corpse. Torvund, Kira's warning came sharp. But Alara was already moving, crossing the room until she stood inches from the massive warrior. Get out. Torvund's eyebrows rose. Excuse me? Get out. Alara's voice dropped to something dangerous. All of you, leave us alone. Luna, Kira started. That's an order. Alara didn't look away from Torvund. Unless you're planning to challenge it. For a long moment, Torvund stared down at her, easily twice her size, a warrior who'd been fighting since before she was born. Then, slowly, something like respect flickered across his face. You heard your Luna, he said to the others. Out. They filed out slowly, Kira with a backward glance, the healers who'd been hovering uselessly near the door, guards who'd been standing ready for violence. The door closed with a heavy thud. Silence fell. Alara stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, hands still clenched. Through the bond, she felt nothing but cold and absence. Riven was somewhere deep inside himself, unreachable, dying by inches while she stood here powerless. Fuck, she whispered. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Heat bloomed in her chest. Alara froze. The sensation was foreign, unexpected, warmth spreading beneath her ribs like something waking up. Not the bond. This was different. This was hers alone, something dormant stirring to life. She pressed a hand to her sternum. The heat intensified. Fire. The thought came from nowhere and everywhere at once. Fire magic. The only force capable of breaking winter's hold. But that was impossible. Alara wasn't a fire witch. Her bloodline was pure wolf, strong, yes, but ordinary. There was no magic in her family history, no legends of elemental power. She was just... The heat pulsed again, stronger this time, hot enough to make her gasp. Alara stumbled to the bed, sank down beside Riven's frozen form. His hand was ice beneath hers, his breath crystallized in the air. Dying. He was dying because he'd felt too much, because the curse punished emotion with death, because loving someone meant destroying yourself. Unless Alara pressed both hands to Riven's chest, right over his heart. The cold bit into her palms like teeth. But beneath it, deeper, she felt something else. A flicker, a spark. The tiniest ember of warmth that refused to die completely. "Come on," she whispered. "Come back. I know you're in there. I can feel you." Nothing. Alara closed her eyes and reached through the bond, not with her mind, but with whatever this heat was building in her chest. She let it flow down her arms, into her hands, into Riven's frozen heart. Fire met ice. The reaction was immediate and violent. Riven's body arched off the bed, back bowing, mouth opening in a silent scream. Frost spread faster across his skin. Defense mechanism, the curse fighting back against the intrusion. "No!" Alara pushed harder, pouring more heat into him. "You don't get to take him. You don't—" The bedroom door slammed open. Alara's eyes snapped up to see an old woman standing in the doorway, ancient, bent, wrapped in robes the color of fresh snow. Her eyes were white as milk, unseen and all-seeing at once. "Stop!" The woman's voice was cracked ice. "You're killing him faster. I'm trying to save him. You're feeding the curse." The woman moved into the room with surprising speed. Fire accelerates winter magic, makes it burn hotter, colder, deadlier. What you're doing is mercy in reverse. Alara jerked her hands away from Riven's chest. The heat in her own chest guttered and died. "Who are you?" "I'm the one who cast the curse." The old woman's smile was gentle and terrible. "And I'm here to collect what's owed." The world tilted. Alara stared at this ancient creature, mind refusing to process the words. "You... what?" 30 years ago, Riven's father killed my daughter." The woman moved to the bedside, looking down at Riven with something like fondness. "Slaughtered her during a territorial dispute, so I cursed his bloodline. Every Kael who loves dies. Simple, elegant, fair." "Fair?" Alara's voice came out strangled. "You cursed an entire family because of one man's actions?" "I cursed the line that produced him." The old woman's white eyes shifted to Alara. "And it's worked beautifully. Riven's father froze to death. His grandfather before that. Every Kael Alpha for 3 generations dying the moment they felt something real." Her smile widened. "Until now." "What do you mean, until now?" "You were supposed to be different." The woman circled the bed slowly. "When Riven chose you, I thought finally he'd found someone cold enough to match him. Someone who'd want power more than love, someone who'd keep him safe from his own heart." Alara's blood ran cold. You knew about me? About us? I've been watching Riven his whole life." The woman's voice was almost affectionate. "Making sure the curse stayed active. Making sure he never found a loophole. And you were perfect, a rejected bride, and angry and ambitious, looking for revenge instead of romance." She tilted her head. "But then you went and ruined it." "Ruined what?" "You fell in love with him." The accusation hung in the air like poison. "Despite everything, despite knowing better, you let yourself feel something real, and now he's dying because he felt it back. That's not— I don't—" Alara's throat closed. "Don't bother lying." The old woman waved a dismissive hand. "I can see it in you, taste it on the air. You love him. And the moment he realized it, the moment he let himself love you back." She gestured at Riven's frozen form. "The curse took its price." Alara looked down at Riven, at the ice spreading across his skin, at his chest barely moving, at the bond between them that had become a death sentence. "Break it," Alara said hoarsely. "The curse. Break it. I'll give you anything." "There's nothing to break." The old woman's smile turned pitying. "The curse is woven into his blood, into his bones. It's as much a part of him as his wolf. The only way to remove it is to remove him." "Then what do you want?" Alara's hands clenched. "Why are you here? To gloat? To watch him die?" "I'm here because you have something I need." The old woman's white eyes fixed on Alara with uncomfortable intensity. "Fire magic, dormant for generations, buried so deep you didn't know it existed. But it's there. I can smell it burning beneath your skin." The heat in Alara's chest pulsed in response. "You're the first Virel in 200 years to carry the flame, the old woman continued, and you're wasting it trying to save a cursed wolf when you could be what? Powerful. The word hung between them, seductive and sharp. Fire magic is rare, precious. With training, with focus, you could level mountains, command armies, make every pack in the territories bow to you. I don't want armies, Alara said flatly. I want him alive. Even if it costs you everything? The old woman leaned closer. Because that's what it'll take. Breaking this curse, truly breaking it, not just delaying the inevitable, requires a sacrifice. Blood magic. Life for life. Alara's breath caught. What kind of sacrifice? The fire in you is newborn, weak. But there's another source. The old woman's gaze drifted past Alara, towards something unseen. Another bloodline with power that could shatter winter magic completely. All you have to do is take it. Take it from where? From the one who orchestrated all of this. The old woman's smile turned sharp. From the high priestess who arranged your rejection, who whispered in Darian's ear about stronger matches, who made sure you'd be desperate enough to accept Riven's offer. The floor dropped out from under Alara's feet. What? Did you really think Darian rejected you on his own? The old woman laughed, a sound like breaking glass. That a pre-bond 6 years strong just happened to vanish the night you wore a wedding dress? Someone helped it along. Someone with the power to sever soul ties and rewrite destiny. Who? Alara's voice was barely a whisper. Lysara Vane. The name fell like a stone. High priestess of the Winter Coven. My daughter's daughter. My blood. The room spun. Alara gripped the bedpost to keep from falling. She's been planning this for years, the old woman continued. Weakening your bond with Darian. Strengthening his attraction to Sarah. Making sure you'd be vulnerable, angry, desperate enough to accept the enemy's hand. Also you'd bond with Riven. Also the curse would have fresh fuel. Why? The question ripped out of Alara. Why would she? Because I asked her to. The old woman's face was serene. Because watching Riven's line die out slowly wasn't enough. I wanted him to suffer, to feel real love and lose it, to know what my daughter felt when his father's blade took her life. Alara's vision swam. You're saying my entire life, the pre-bond with Darian, the rejection, coming here, it was all manipulated? All part of your revenge? Yes. The word hung in the air like an executioner's blade. And now you're going to help me finish it, the old woman said. You're going to find Lysara. You're going to take her power, the fire magic she stole from our original bloodline, and you're going to use it to break Riven's curse. Why would I trust you? Alara's voice shook with fury. Why would I believe anything you say when you've spent 30 years orchestrating death? Because it's the only way to save him. The old woman gestured at Riven. He has hours, maybe less. Even if you refuse, even if you let him die, the curse continues. It'll find the next Kael in line, and the next, and the next. Every generation dying the moment they feel something real. Unless I kill your granddaughter. Unless you take back what she stole. The old woman's correction was precise. The fire magic Lysara uses to manipulate bonds and sever destinies, that power came from our family, from the same bloodline that runs through you. She's been hoarding it, using it for her own purposes, but it belongs to you now. And if I do this, Alara forced the words out, if I find Lysara and take her power, the curse breaks? Completely. Permanently. Riven lives. The Kael line is freed. And you? The old woman's smile was knowing. You become something neither wolf nor witch. Something new. Alara looked down at Riven's frozen form. His lips had gone from blue to white. Frost climbed his throat like fingers. Hours, the old woman had said. Maybe less. How do I find her? Alara heard herself ask. She'll find you. The old woman was already moving toward the door. The moment Riven stops breathing, she'll come to collect the result of her work. To gloat, to claim her victory. And then what? What? Fight her? Take her magic by force? Fire calls to fire. The old woman paused at the threshold. When you see her, when you feel the stolen power burning inside her chest, you'll know what to do. Her white eyes found Alara's one last time. The question is whether you're strong enough to do it. She vanished. Not walked away. Not left normally. Just ceased to be there, like she'd never existed at all. Alara stood alone in the room with Riven dying on the bed and a terrible choice crystallizing in her mind. Trust the woman who'd cursed him and orchestrated everything. Hunt down the priestess who'd manipulated her entire life. Take power that might save Riven, or might destroy them both. Or refuse. Let Riven die. Accept that some things couldn't be fixed, that some curses ran too deep, that love was just another word for loss. Through the bond, faint now, fading, Alara felt Riven's presence flicker, like a candle in wind. Almost gone. Fuck! She pressed her hands to her face, breathed hard. Fuck! This is insane! This is... Heat bloomed in her chest again. That fire magic the old woman had named, recognizing itself, demanding to be used. Alara looked at her hands. They were shaking. Ordinary hands, wolf hands, nothing special except there was power there now. Dormant for generations, buried beneath years of thinking she was ordinary, thinking she was just a strong wolf in the wrong pack. But she wasn't ordinary. She never had been. And if taking that power, that stolen fire burning in some distant priestess's chest, was what saved Riven, then Riven's breathing stopped. Alara's head snapped toward him. His chest had gone completely still. No rise, no fall, just frozen silence. No. She lunged for the bed, pressed her ear to his chest. Nothing. No heartbeat, no breath, no warmth except the heat of her own skin against his ice. Riven, she shook him. Riven, wake up. Come back. You can't. The bond went dark. Not cold, not distant. Dark. Like someone had cut a rope and she was falling through nothing, grasping at air, screaming into void. No, no, no! Alara's hands moved on instinct, compressions on his frozen chest, breath into his blue lips, anything to force life back into him. Don't you dare! Don't you fucking dare leave me like this! The door burst open. Kira rushed in, took one look at the scene, and her face went white. He's not dead, Alara snarled, still doing compressions. He's not. The bond is just... It's dormant. It's... Alara. Kira's hand landed on her shoulder. Stop. He's gone. He's not. He is. Kira's voice cracked. I'm sorry, but he's... A sound like wind through empty halls filled the room. Both women froze. The air itself was changing, thickening, darkening, taking on weight and presence. And then, between one breath and the next, someone else was standing there. A woman. Tall, draped in robes of silver and ice blue, hair white as new snow and eyes the color of winter sky. Beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Powerful in a way that made Alara's wolf cower. How touching. The woman's voice was silk over steel. The rejected bride, weeping over her consolation prize. Alara surged to her feet, hands still stained with frost from Riven's skin. Who? Lysara Vane, the woman smiled. High priestess of the Winter Coven, architect of your suffering, and the reason that wolf is currently decorating your bed like an ice sculpture. Rage exploded in Alara's chest, white-hot, incandescent, burning away fear and grief and every careful control she'd learned. You. The word came out scorched. The old woman said, You manipulated my bond with Darian. You made him reject me. I encouraged what was already there. Lysara moved closer, examining Riven's frozen corpse with academic interest. Darian didn't need much convincing. His ambition did most of the work. I just helped him see that you'd be a liability instead of an asset. Why? Alara's hands clenched. What did I ever do to you? Nothing. Lysara's smile was gentle. You were just convenient. The right bloodline, the right circumstances, the right amount of pride and anger to make you useful. Useful for what? For finishing my grandmother's work. Lysara gestured at Riven. The curse was elegant but incomplete. It kept the Kyle Alphas from loving, yes, but it didn't make them suffer enough. Didn't make them feel the full weight of loss. Her eyes found Alara's. So I found you. I severed your bond with Darian. I made sure Riven would see you as perfect. A woman too angry to love, too proud to need, too damaged to risk his heart on. But he did, Alara whispered. He loved me anyway. Yes. Lysara's voice dripped satisfaction. And watching him realize it, watching him try to stop it, watching the curse take him while you stood there helpless. That was the real revenge. Not just death, devastation. Alara's vision swam red, the heat in her chest built to inferno levels. You're going to die, she said quietly. For what you did to him, to us, to it. Am I? Lysara laughed. You're a wolf, child. Strong, yes. But I'm a high priestess with 2 centuries of accumulated power. You can't touch me. Then why are you here? Alara took a step forward. If I'm no threat, why bother showing up? Something flickered in Lysara's expression, there and gone too fast to name. To make sure the job is finished, the priestess said, to confirm that... She stopped. Her eyes went to Alara's chest, where heat was building visible now, a glow beneath skin, red and gold and burning. No, Lysara's face went pale. That's not possible. The Varel fire magic has been dormant for generations, Alara finished. I know. Your grandmother told me. Right before she told me where it really came from. She lunged. Not with her body, with the fire. It poured out of her chest like a river breaking through a dam. Raw, uncontrolled, fueled by grief and rage and love she'd tried so hard not to feel. The flames hit Lysara square in the chest, and the priestess screamed, You can't! Lysara threw up defensive shields, ice and winter magic forming walls between them. You don't know how to... I don't need to know. Alara pushed harder, feeling the fire respond to her will like it had been waiting her whole life for permission. I just need to burn hot enough. The flames intensified. Lysara's shields cracked, and through the fire, through the chaos, Alara felt it, another source of heat. Not hers, not natural. Stolen fire, buried deep in Lysara's chest where it had been hoarded for centuries. Power that belonged to Alara's bloodline. Power that could break curses and rewrite destinies. Power that could save Riven. Give it back, Alara snarled. Give back what you stole. Never. Alara reached through the flames, through Lysara's defenses, through every barrier the priestess tried to throw up. She wrapped her will around that stolen fire and pulled. Lysara shrieked. The power came loose like a tooth yanked from a jaw, violent, bloody, agonizing. It poured into Alara in a torrent of heat and light and raw magic that burned through her veins like liquid gold. Too much. It was too much. Her body couldn't contain this, couldn't process... Stop! Kira's voice from somewhere distant. Alara, you're burning yourself apart. But Alara couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. Not when she could feel the full scope of what Lysara had stolen, what she'd hoarded, what she'd used to manipulate bonds and sever destinies and orchestrate suffering. Not when she could feel Riven's frozen corpse on the bed behind her, cold and still and waiting. The last of the stolen fire ripped free. Lysara collapsed, screaming, hands clutched to her chest where a hole now gaped, not physical, but visible anyway. A void where power used to be. The priestess gasped. You've killed us both. That much power will consume you from the inside. You'll burn until there's nothing left but... Alara turned away from her, turned toward Riven, turned toward the frozen body of the man she'd tried so hard not to love, and loved anyway, desperately, completely, enough to unmake herself if it meant saving him. Watch, Alara said. She placed both hands on Riven's chest and let the fire loose, not as an attack, as a gift. Every ounce of stolen power, every drop of heat she'd pulled from Lysara's chest, every spark of her own dormant magic, she poured it into Riven's frozen heart. Fire met ice, and this time, instead of feeding the curse, instead of accelerating death, the ice shattered. Riven's body convulsed, his back arched, his mouth opened in a gasp that pulled air into lungs that had been still for minutes? Hours. Alara had lost track. The frost covering his skin didn't just melt. It evaporated. Steam rose from his body in waves as heat flooded through him, burning away the curse from the inside out. Behind Alara, Lysara was still screaming, rage now instead of pain. No, it's not possible. The curse is blood deep. It can't... It can if you burn hot enough, Alara said, without looking back. Riven's eyes snapped open, no longer gray, no longer black with curse death. Gold, burning gold, like embers caught in his irises. He grabbed Alara's wrists where her hand still pressed against his chest. What did you do? His voice was raw, scorched. I felt the bond went dark, and then I broke it, Alara said simply. The curse. I burned it out. How does it matter? Alara's own voice was shaking now, exhaustion hitting like a tidal wave. You're alive, that's... She swayed. Riven caught her before she fell, pulling her against his chest. Warm now, burning warm, heat radiating from him like he'd swallowed the sun. You're an idiot, he said against her hair. Taking on a high priestess with no training, no control, you could have died. So could you, Alara managed. You did die. I felt the bond go dark. I felt you. I know. His arms tightened. I felt it too. The curse taking me. Everything going cold. And then his voice caught. Fire. You're fire. Pulling me back. Behind them, Lysara was trying to stand, weakened but not defeated, hands already weaving new magic, ice forming at her fingertips. This isn't over, the priestess hissed. You may have stolen my power, broken the curse, but I still have... Riven moved. One moment he was holding Alara. The next he was across the room with his hand wrapped around Lysara's throat, eyes burning with that new gold fire. You manipulated her bond, he said quietly. You orchestrated her rejection. You used her as a weapon against me and my family for 3 generations. My father was a monster, Riven interrupted. I won't defend what he did, but you didn't curse him, you cursed me, my grandfather, every Kael who came after, who had nothing to do with your daughter's death. Revenge doesn't care about, neither do I. Riven's grip tightened. You're done. No more curses, no more manipulation, no more... Wait! Alara's voice stopped him. She was on her feet now, swaying but standing, eyes locked on Lysara's face. Don't kill her. Riven's eyebrows rose. After everything I know what she did. Alara moved closer. But killing her makes us the same as her. Makes this about revenge instead of... She stopped, searching for words. Instead of choosing something different. She tried to destroy us, Riven said flatly. She failed. Alara's hand found his shoulder. We're here, we're alive. The curse is broken. Letting her die in rage and bitterness, that just continues the cycle. For a long moment, Riven stared at Lysara with murder in his burning eyes. Then, slowly, his hand opened. Lysara collapsed, gasping and powerless. If you ever come near my pack again, Riven said quietly, if you ever attempt to harm Alara or anyone under my protection, I will forget mercy. I will make you beg for the death I'm giving you now. Understood? Lysara nodded, unable to speak. Get her out of here, Riven told Kira. Strip her of rank, titles, whatever power she has left in the coven. Make sure everyone knows what she did, and if she resurfaces... She won't, Kira said grimly, already hauling the priestess to her feet. I'll make sure of it. They dragged Lysara out. The door closed. Silence fell like snow. Alara and Riven stood in the wreckage of the room, frost melting into puddles, scorch marks on the walls, the air still crackling with residual magic. They stood and looked at each other like strangers meeting for the first time. We should talk, Riven said finally. About what? About the fact that you just destroyed yourself to save me. His jaw flexed. About the fact that you took on a high priestess with centuries of experience and somehow won. About the fact that you're standing there with fire magic burning in your veins and you haven't collapsed yet. I'm about to, Alara admitted. Her legs felt like water. Her chest ached where the fire had poured out. Any second now. Then talk fast. Riven crossed to her, caught her before she fell again. Why? Why risk everything for... Because I love you. The words fell out before Alara could stop them. Because I tried not to. Because I knew what it would cost. Because I told myself it was just political. But I love you. And watching you die, feeling the bond go dark. I couldn't... Her voice broke. Riven was quiet for a long moment. Then, The curse is gone. I know. Which means I can feel everything now. Without filters. Without control. His hands tightened on her waist. And what I'm feeling... Don't. Alara pressed her hand to his mouth. Don't say it just because you think you have to. Don't say it because I said it first. Don't... Riven kissed her palm, then her wrist, then pulled her close enough that she could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady and warm, against her chest. I'm saying it because it's true, he said against her hair. Because I've been fighting it since the moment you took my hand in Silver Peak's courtyard. Because the curse made me think feeling this would kill me. But it turns out not feeling it was what was slowly destroying me all along. Alara's throat closed. Riven, I love you. The words were quiet, certain, absolute. Not because you saved me, not because you broke the curse, because you're terrifying and brilliant, and you chose yourself when everyone told you to be smaller, because you walked into enemy territory and made it yours, because you... Alara kissed him. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. It was desperate and hungry, and tasted like smoke and melted ice. Riven kissed her back like she was air, and he'd been drowning, hands tangling in her hair, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. The bond flared to life, not the cold distance it had been, not the controlled frost. This was heat and light and connection so intense it made Alara gasp into his mouth. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Riven's eyes were still that burning gold. What happens now? Alara asked. Now? Riven's mouth curved. Now we have a pact to lead, a territory to defend, probably a war with Silver Peak to prevent. His hand found hers, laced their fingers together. And we do it together. As actual partners, as mates who don't have to pretend not to feel anything, as mates who can finally be honest about what this is. Riven pulled her close again, which is terrifying. Completely, Alara agreed. They stood there in the ruined room, holding each other, both alive despite every odd stacked against them. Outside, Dravaran territory waited, harsh and beautiful in theirs. Outside, Silver Peak was probably already planning retaliation. Outside, a world of politics and power and problems they'd have to face. But inside this moment, in this room, with this bond burning bright between them, everything else could wait. Alara was about to say something, she didn't know what, didn't have words for the relief and exhaustion and love tangling in her chest, when Kira burst back through the door. We have a problem, the beta said grimly. Of course they did. Lysara's gone, Kira continued. We were transporting her to the holding cells and she just vanished, dissolved into mist. Alara's stomach dropped. What? She's not powerless, Kira said. Weakened, yes, but she still has enough magic to escape. And based on what she was screaming when she disappeared, Kira's face was grim. She's going to the coven. She's calling in every debt, every alliance, every witch who owes her loyalty. To do what? Riven demanded. To finish what she started. Kira met their eyes. She's raising an army, and she's coming back to burn Dravaran to... The word burn hung in the air like smoke before a wildfire. Alara's hands clenched. Her chest still ached from channeling fire she barely understood. Her legs trembled from exhaustion, and now this, an army of winter witches coming to finish what Lysara started. How long? Riven's voice was steel. No panic, no hesitation, pure alpha command. 3 days, Kira said, maybe 4. Our scouts spotted movement at the northern peaks, dozens of witches converging. They're gathering power, preparing for a siege. Torvin appeared behind Kira, face grim as stone. I've seen coven warfare before. They don't fight like packs. They'll freeze our water sources, turn our own territory against us, make the land itself hostile until we either surrender or starve. Then we don't give them 3 days. Riven was already moving, crossing to the war table against the far wall. Maps spread across it. Dravarian territory marked in dark ink, borders labeled, strategic positions circled. We hit them first, while they're still gathering, before they finish their preparations. That's suicide, someone said from the doorway. More wolves had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Warriors, advisors, pack members who'd heard Lysara's screaming and knew something had broken. It's strategy. Riven's finger landed on the northern peaks. They're expecting us to fortify and defend, to turtle up and wait for the attack. We do the opposite. We bring the fight to them before they're ready. With what army? Torvon crossed his arms. We're strong, but we're wolves. They're magic users. Fire and ice don't mix well, and we've only got one fire witch who's about to collapse. Every eye turned to Alara. She was leaning against the bedpost, using it to stay upright. Her skin felt too hot, like the fire she'd pulled from Lysara was still burning beneath the surface. Her hands shook, her vision swam at the edges. I'm fine, she lied. You're barely standing, Kira said flatly. I'll manage. Alara pushed off the bedpost, forced her spine straight. How many witches are we talking about? 40? Maybe 50? Kira's face was grim. The entire Winter Coven, plus whatever mercenaries Lysara can hire with promises of revenge in Dravern's territory. 50 witches. Against a pack of maybe 200 wolves, most of whom had never faced magical combat. The odds were brutal. We need allies, Alar said. Other packs. Neutral territories who don't want to see a coven take control of Dravaren. We don't have allies, Torvon reminded her. 3 generations of isolation, remember? We've burned every bridge, pissed off every neighbor, made ourselves so feared that no one will... Silver Peak will help. The room went dead silent. Alara met their stares. Darian doesn't want a coven controlling Dravaren's territory. It would put winter witches right on his border. He'll help because it's in his interest. Are you insane? Kira's voice was sharp. After what happened at the clearing? After Riven nearly killed him? You think Thorn's going to... I think Darian's smart enough to recognize a threat when he sees one. Alara turned to Riven. And I think if I ask him, if I go there personally... Absolutely not. Riven's voice was flat. You're not going back to Silver Peak. Not alone. Not ever. It's the only way to... I said no. The gold in Riven's eyes flared. Thorn already tried to take you once. You think he won't try again if you walk into his territory asking for help? He won't, Alara said with more certainty than she felt. Because I'll bring you with me. We'll go together, make it official. 2 alphas negotiating an alliance. That's even worse, Torvon muttered. The moment Riven sets foot in Silver Peak, they'll listen, Alara interrupted. Because the alternative is a winter coven on their doorstep. Because Darian's too practical to let personal grudges override survival. Because, she took a breath, because I know how to make him agree. Riven was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Through the bond, she felt his reluctance, his fear, not for himself, but for her. What are you planning? He asked quietly. I'm planning to give him what he actually wants. Alara met his eyes. Recognition. The chance to play hero. A story where he gets to be the magnanimous alpha who sets aside past grievances to fight a common enemy. You're going to let him save face, Kira said slowly. I'm going to give him a narrative he can sell to his pack. Alara's jaw set. And in exchange, he brings his warriors to help us survive the next week. Silence. Then Riven laughed, short and sharp. You really are terrifying. Is that a yes? It's we're doing this together or not at all. Riven straightened. Kira, prepare a small escort. Enough to look official, not enough to seem like an invasion. Torvon, start fortifying defenses here in case Silver Peak says no, and we're back to Plan A. What's Plan A? Someone asked. Fight 50 witches with 200 wolves and hope Alara's fire magic is enough to tip the scales. Riven's smile was cold. So let's make sure we don't need it. They left within the hour. Alara changed into formal leathers, Dravaren colors, reinforced and armed, every inch the Luna she'd become. Riven wore full alpha regalia again, weapons strapped across his back, the gold still burning in his eyes like embers that wouldn't die. The escort was small, just Kira and 6 warriors, enough to make a statement without starting a war. The journey to Silver Peak took 4 hours. 4 hours of silence and preparation, and Alara trying not to think about the last time she'd crossed this border, the last time she'd worn white instead of crimson, the last time she'd believed Darian loved her. It felt like a lifetime ago. It had been less than a month. They reached Silver Peak's border at sunset. Appropriate timing, Alara thought grimly. Everything significant seemed to happen during transitions, dawn or dusk, beginnings or endings. Silver Peak guards met them at the marker stones, a dozen wolves in silver, weapons drawn, faces hostile. "State your business," their leader said. Young, nervous, trying to sound commanding and failing. "We're here to speak with Alpha Thorn," Riven said. "Official pack business. He'll want to hear this." "Alpha Thorn doesn't take meetings with his enemy?" Riven's smile was sharp. "Tell him anyway. Tell him Alara Varel requests an audience regarding a threat to both our territories. Tell him if he refuses, he'll regret it when winter witches are freezing his water sources and killing his people." The guard's face went pale. "Wait here." He disappeared into the trees. They waited. Alara could feel eyes on them, Silver Peak scouts in the branches, warriors hidden in defensive positions, probably a dozen crossbows aimed at Riven's head. Her old pack, treating her like the enemy now. It should have hurt more than it did. "You okay?" Riven's voice was low, meant only for her. "I will be." Alara didn't look at him. "Once this is over." "And if Thorn refuses?" "He won't." She said it with conviction she didn't entirely feel. "He's too smart to let pride override survival." The guard returned, slightly out of breath. "Alpha Thorn will see you, but only you two. Your escort stays here." Kira started to protest, but Riven raised a hand. "Agreed, but if we're not back in an hour, you burn this forest to the ground." The guard swallowed hard. "This way." They followed him through familiar territory, paths Alara had walked 1,000 times, trees she'd climbed as a child, clearings where she'd trained with warriors who now watched her pass with suspicion and barely concealed hostility. Coming back felt like wearing a skin that no longer fit. Silver Peak's main hall loomed ahead, elegant where Draverin was brutal, decorated where her new home was sparse. The doors opened to reveal the same space where she'd been rejected, the same cathedral ceiling of woven silver, the same moonlight trapped in branches overhead. And standing at the center, waiting, was Darian. He looked tired. Dark circles under his storm cloud eyes, jaw tight, shoulders carrying tension like armor. Sarah stood beside him, pale and quiet, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. Pregnant, Alara realized with a jolt, already showing. The knife twisted deeper than it should have. "Alara," Darian's voice was carefully neutral. "I have to admit, I didn't expect you to come back, especially not with—" His eyes cut to Riven, and something ugly flickered across his face. "Him!" "We're not here for pleasantries," Riven said flatly. "We're here because you have a problem, and we're the only ones who can help you solve it." "I don't need help from—" "Lysara Vane is raising an army," Alara interrupted. 40 to 50 winter witches. They're gathering at the northern peaks, preparing to siege Draverin, and once they're finished with us, they'll turn south, toward you." Darian's expression flickered. "Winter witches? Why would they—" "Because I destroyed their high priestess's power and broke a curse she spent 30 years maintaining." Ilara's voice was steady. "Because Riven and I survived something we weren't supposed to, and now Lysara wants revenge. She's coming for Draverin first, but make no mistake, Silver Peak is next on her list." "That's not my problem." "It will be." Riven stepped forward. "When she controls our territory, when she has a foothold this far south, when winter witches are freezing your borders, and you don't have the numbers or the magic to stop them. I have 300 warriors, and they'll die." Alara's voice cut like glass. "Witches don't fight like wolves, Darian. They don't meet you on battlefields or honor challenges. They turn your own land against you. They freeze you from the inside out. And by the time you realize you're losing, it's already too late." Silence fell. Darian looked between them, Alara in her crimson and black, Riven with gold burning in his eyes, both of them alive despite everything that should have killed them. "What are you asking for?" Darian said finally. "An alliance." Riven's voice was precise. "Temporary, tactical. You bring your warriors to the northern peaks. We fight the Coven together. Once they're defeated, we return to our respective territories and resume normal hostilities. You want me to risk my pack's lives to save yours. I want you to be smart enough to see the bigger threat." Alara stepped forward. "This isn't about us, Darian. This isn't about what happened between us or whose pride got bruised. This is about survival. About stopping a coven from gaining enough power to threaten every pack in the region." And why should I believe you? Darian's voice turned sharp. Why should I trust that this isn't some elaborate trap, that the moment my warriors are committed, you won't turn on them? Because we're bonded, Riven said quietly. Alara and I. Permanently. Which means if I betray you, I betray her, and I won't do that. Something in Darian's face twisted. How touching. The enemy loves his stolen bride. She wasn't stolen, Riven said. She was smart enough to leave. You manipulated her. I offered her a choice. Riven's voice dropped to something dangerous. Which is more than you did. You rejected her publicly, humiliated her in front of everyone she knew, and then had the audacity to demand her back when it became politically inconvenient. So don't stand there and lecture me about manipulation. Darian's hands clenched. Around them, Silver Peak warriors shifted, ready for violence. Stop! Alara's voice cut through the tension. Both of you. This isn't about whose ego is bigger or who wronged who. This is about the fact that in 3 days, maybe 4, an army of winter witches is going to descend on Dravarin, and if we don't work together, they'll win. And if we do work together? Darian's eyes were on her now, searching. What happens after? Do you come back here? Do we? No. The word was final. I'm Dravarin's Luna, Riven's mate. That doesn't change. Ever. Then what's in it for me? Darian spread his hands. You're asking me to commit resources, risk lives. For what? So you can go back to your new pack and I get… what? The satisfaction of having helped my enemy? Alara took a breath. This was it. The moment where she either played this right or lost everything. You get to be the alpha who put the region's safety above personal grudges, she said carefully. You get to be the leader who recognized a threat and acted decisively. You get to stand in front of your pack and say that you protected them from a coven that would have destroyed everything you've built. I get a story, Darian said flatly. You get legacy. Alara held his gaze. You rejected me because you wanted to look strong, wanted to be seen as the alpha who made hard choices for his pack's benefit. Fine. Here's your chance to prove it. Help us fight the coven, save both our territories, and everyone will remember you as the alpha who was strong enough to set aside revenge for survival. Silence stretched. Sarah's hand found Darian's arm. She's right, the quiet Luna said. If what they're saying is true, if there really are 50 witches gathering, we can't ignore that. It's too big a threat. You want me to help them? Darian's voice was incredulous. I want you to protect our pack. Sarah's voice was soft but firm. Even if it means working with people you don't like, even if it means swallowing your pride. Darian stared at his mate. This woman he'd chosen instead of Alara, this gentle soul who was somehow brave enough to stand up to him when it mattered. 200 warriors, he said finally. That's what I can commit. We meet at the northern peaks in 2 days. We fight as separate forces but coordinated strategy, and the moment the coven is defeated, this alliance ends, permanently. Relief crashed through Alara so hard her knees almost buckled. Agreed, Riven said. And one more thing. Darian's eyes found Alara's. After this is over, after the coven is defeated and we go our separate ways, you don't come back here, ever. Silver Peak is closed to you. You made your choice. Live with it. The word should have hurt, should have felt like exile or abandonment or loss. Instead, Alara felt free. Deal, she said. They hammered out details quickly, meeting coordinates, tactical positions, signal protocols in case the battle went wrong. Darian was professional, clinical, treating it like any other military operation. No emotion, no acknowledgement of what they'd once been to each other. It was perfect. By the time they finished, night had fallen completely. Darian dismissed them with a curt nod, already turning to give orders to his warriors. Sarah caught Alara's arm as they turned to leave. I'm sorry, the quiet Luna said, for how this happened, Don't be. Alara surprised herself by meaning it. You didn't do anything wrong, and honestly… She glanced at Darian, already lost in tactical planning. I think you're exactly what he needs. Someone strong enough to call him on his bullshit. Someone who won't let him become the worst version of himself. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Then she smiled, small, genuine. Good luck with the battle, with everything. You too. Alara left before this moment could get more complicated. Riven was waiting outside. Kira and the escort gathered around him. The moment Alara appeared, the tension in his shoulders eased slightly. "Well?" Kira demanded. "We have an alliance." Alara's voice was steady. 200 Silver Peak warriors, meeting in 2 days at the northern peaks. He actually agreed? Torvin sounded skeptical. He's smart enough to recognize a real threat when he sees one. Alara looked at Riven. "Now, we just have to make sure we survive what comes next." They traveled back to Dravarin through darkness, pushing hard, arriving just before dawn. The fortress was already alive with activity, warriors training, weapons being sharpened, supplies being organized. War preparation. Alara had seen it before, but never like this. Never with the knowledge that in 48 hours she'd be standing on a battlefield facing magic she barely understood, leading a pack that still didn't entirely trust her, fighting beside the man she loved who'd almost died in her arms just hours ago. The next 2 days blurred together in a haze of preparation and planning. Riven drilled the warriors relentlessly, teaching them to fight in coordinated units, to recognize magical attacks, to protect the vulnerable while the strong pushed forward. Kira organized supply lines and fallback positions. Torvon worked with scouts to map the northern peaks, identifying choke points and defensive positions. And Alara learned to control fire. There was no teacher, no mentor, just her and the power burning in her chest, and the desperate knowledge that if she couldn't harness this, if she couldn't turn it into a weapon, people would die. She practiced in isolated clearings, away from anything flammable. Started small, conjuring flames in her palms, learning to shape them, learning to make them grow or shrink at will. Then bigger, streams of fire, walls of heat, concentrated blasts that could melt stone. It hurt. Every time she channeled the power, it burned through her veins like acid, left her shaking and nauseous and covered in sweat. But she kept going, because the alternative was watching Riven die again, watching Dravarin fall, watching everything they'd built together turn to ash. On the second night, Riven found her collapsed in a clearing, hands scorched, breathing ragged. "You're going to kill yourself before the battle even starts," he said quietly, kneeling beside her. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding." He caught her wrist, turning her palm up. Blisters covered her skin, some broken and weeping. "This is... Alara, you can't... I have to." She pulled her hand back. "You've seen what the Coven can do. Ice magic that freezes from the inside out. Curses that kill with a touch. If I can't match that, if I can't protect our people, you don't have to do this alone." Riven's voice was gentle. "We have 500 warriors between Dravarin and Silver Peak. We have strategy, numbers, terrain advantage. We have 1 fire witch against 50 winter witches." Alara met his eyes. "You know how this ends if I'm not strong enough." Silence. Then Riven pulled her close, careful of her burned hands, and held her while she shook with exhaustion and fear and determination. "I'm terrified," he had admitted against her hair, "of losing you, of watching you burn yourself out trying to save everyone, I know." Alara pressed her face to his chest. "I'm terrified too, but we don't have a choice. We fight or we die. Those are the options." "Then we fight." Riven's arms tightened. "Together, no matter what comes." "No matter what," Alara echoed. The next morning, they marched. 500 wolves, 200 from Dravarin in crimson and black, 200 from Silver Peak in silver and gray, and another 100 from smaller packs who'd heard about the Coven and decided survival outweighed ancient grudges. They moved in formation through forest and over hills, a river of warriors flowing north toward the peaks where winter witches waited. Alara rode at the front beside Riven, Kira on her left, Darian maintaining careful distance on her right. The two alphas didn't speak to each other, didn't acknowledge each other beyond tactical necessity. It was enough. They reached the northern peaks at sunset on the third day. The landscape was brutal, jagged rocks, sparse vegetation, wind that cut like knives, and at the highest point gathered in a semicircle around what looked like an altar of ice. The Coven. Alara's breath caught. There were more than 50, closer to 70, maybe 80. All dressed in robes of white and ice blue, all with hands already weaving patterns in the air, all watching the approaching army with expressions that ranged from anticipation to hunger. And at the center, standing on the altar itself, was Lysara. She looked different than she had in Dravarine's fortress. Stronger, more solid, like she'd regained some of the power Alara had ripped away, or drawn it from another source entirely.
"Welcome," Lysara's voice carried across the distance, amplified by magic. "I'm so glad you could make it. Both packs working together. How touching. How—" Her smile was cold. "Futile." "Defensive positions," Riven ordered quietly. "Archers to high ground. Shields forward. Wait for my signal." The army shifted, warriors moving into formation with practiced efficiency. Silver Peak on the left flank, Dravarin on the right, smaller packs filling gaps in between. Alara dismounted, feet hitting stone, fire built in her chest, responding to proximity to the coven, to Lysara's stolen power, to the threat crackling in the air. "You don't have to do this," she called up to the High Priestess. "The curse is broken. Riven's alive. Your revenge failed. You can walk away." "Walk away?" Lysara laughed. "When I have an army. When I have power you can't imagine. When I have the perfect opportunity to destroy both packs in one glorious—" "You have nothing," Alara interrupted. "I took your stolen fire, broke your curse, exposed your manipulation. You're just a bitter old woman clinging to a revenge that stopped mattering the moment we survived it." Lysara's face twisted. "You think you're safe because you have numbers? Because you convince these fools to fight for you? I'll show you what real power looks like." She raised her hands. The coven moved as one. Ice exploded across the battlefield, jagged spears shooting from the ground, walls of frost cutting off retreat routes, a blizzard manifesting from nothing to blind and disorient. Warriors screamed. Some fell immediately, frozen mid-step. Others scattered, defensive formations breaking under magical assault. "Hold!" Riven's voice cut through chaos. "Shields up! Protect the flanks!" Alara didn't wait for orders. She reached for the fire in her chest and let it loose. Flames erupted from her hands in a torrent, meeting the ice walls and shattering them into steam. Heat rolled across the battlefield, melting frost, creating clear zones where warriors could regroup. "There!" Lysara's voice was sharp with triumph. "The Fire Witch! Focus everything on—" 20 witches turned their attention to Alara. The assault hit like a physical blow, ice daggers aimed at her heart, frost trying to coat her lungs, cold that burrowed beneath her skin and sought her core. Alara screamed, throwing up walls of fire, burning away what she could, but there was too much, too fast, too— Riven was there. He crashed into the nearest witch with pure physical force, taking her down before she could complete whatever spell she was weaving. Then another. Then another. Moving like violence incarnate, eyes burning gold, using speed and strength to disrupt the coven's focus. "With your alpha," Kira's voice rallied Dravoran warriors. "Break their lines! Don't let them concentrate!" The battlefield descended into chaos. Wolves against witches. Fire against ice. Strategy dissolving into desperate survival as both sides threw everything they had into the fight. Alara fought like something possessed, channeling fire in every direction, burning through ice attacks, protecting clusters of warriors who'd gotten pinned down. Her hands were scorched again, worse this time. Blood ran from her nose. Her vision swam, but she kept fighting, because Riven was out there, surrounded by 3 witches, frost spreading up his legs. Because Kira had taken an ice spear through the shoulder and was still fighting one-handed. Because this was everything: survival, future, the pack she'd chosen, and the mate she loved, and the life they'd built together. A blast of cold hit her from behind. Alara's knees hit stone. Ice spread across her back, her ribs, seeking her heart. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't— "Alara!" Riven's voice, distant and desperate. She looked up through blurred vision to see Lysara standing above her, hands glowing with stolen power that shouldn't exist, smile triumphant and cruel. "Did you really think you could beat me?" the High Priestess asked. "With your untrained magic and your pathetic wolves? I've been doing this for 200 years. I've ended bloodlines. Fire exploded from Alara's chest. Not controlled, not shaped, just raw, desperate power, fueled by rage and love, and the absolute refusal to die here, like this, when they'd come so far. The flames hit Lysara dead center. The High Priestess screamed, really screamed this time, not in triumph, but in agony, as fire consumed the ice magic she'd been channeling. The stolen power Alara had missed during their first confrontation. The reserves Lysara had hidden, the backup plan she'd been counting on. It all burned. Alara stood on legs that shook, hands outstretched, pouring everything she had into the assault. Around her, the battle raged. Warriors fell, witches died, blood-stained snow and fire melted ice, and somewhere in the chaos, Riven was fighting his way toward her with murder in his burning eyes. "You can't," Lysara gasped, trying to shield herself, trying to counter. "I won't let you. You don't get a choice," Alara said. She reached through the flames, through Lysara's desperate defenses, and wrapped her will around the core of the High Priestess's power. Then she pulled. Lysara's scream cut off abruptly as every ounce of magic, stolen, hoarded, corrupted over 2 centuries, ripped free and poured into Alara like liquid lightning. It was too much. Way too much. More power than any one person should hold, burning through Alara's veins like poison and glory, destroying her from the inside while making her more than she'd ever been. She was going to die from this. She knew it with absolute certainty. But if she died, she was taking Lysara and this entire cursed coven with her. Alara opened her mouth and screamed fire. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. Actual flames poured from her throat in a torrent that turned the northern peaks into daylight, that melted snow into steam, that consumed everything in its path with the kind of heat that existed at the center of stars. Lysara didn't even have time to scream again. The High Priestess simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant. Her 2 centuries of stolen power, corrupted magic, and vengeance turned to ash and smoke. The remaining witches scattered. Some tried to fight back, ice meeting fire in explosions of steam and violence. Others ran, abandoning the battle entirely, fleeing into the peaks. A handful dropped to their knees and surrendered, hands raised, magic extinguished. Alara stood at the center of it all, flames still pouring from her hands and mouth and chest, power burning so hot that the stone beneath her feet cracked and glowed red. She couldn't stop. The magic was too much, too wild, consuming her from the inside while she burned everything external. Her skin was splitting, her bones felt like they were turning to ash. She could feel herself coming apart, cell by cell, destroyed by the very power that had saved them. "Alara!" Riven's voice cut through the roar of flames. "Alara, stop! You're killing yourself!" She tried to answer. Couldn't. The fire had taken her voice, her control, everything except the raw need to burn until nothing remained. Riven reached her somehow, charging through flames that should have incinerated him, taking burns that would scar for life, grabbing her shoulders with hands that smoked on contact. "Look at me," he demanded. "Alara, look at me." She forced her eyes to focus on his face, on the gold burning in his irises that matched the fire consuming her, on the determination etched in every line, on the bond between them that sang with heat and desperation. "You don't have to do this alone," Riven said, and his voice was steady despite the flames. "You don't have to carry all of it. Give some to me." Alara shook her head frantically. She couldn't. If she channeled this power into him, it would destroy him, would burn through the bond and turn him to ash just like it was doing to her. "Trust me," Riven said. "The curse is gone. I can feel everything now, including this." His hands tightened on her shoulders. "Let me share the weight." He pressed his forehead to hers. The bond flared wide open, not just the surface connection they'd maintained, but everything. Every wall down, every defense stripped away, soul to soul, completely bare, with nothing held back. And Alara felt it happen. The fire didn't pour into Riven, it split between them. Half in her chest, half in his, the burden divided equally through the bond. The pain didn't disappear, but it became bearable, survivable. Together, they breathed out. The flames guttered and died. Silence fell across the battlefield like snow. Alara collapsed into Riven's arms, shaking so hard her teeth rattled. Around them, warriors stared in shock, at the smoking crater where Lysara had stood, at the surrendering witches, at the 2 alphas wrapped around each other and glowing with residual heat. "Is it over?" Kira's voice, hoarse and disbelieving. "It's over," Riven said quietly. The battlefield erupted into chaos of a different kind, cheering, crying, warriors checking each other for injuries, medics rushing forward to treat the wounded. The Alliance held together just long enough to secure the surrendering witches
and confirmed that no more threats lurked in the peaks. Then it fractured. Silver Peak warriors gathered around Darien, already preparing to march back to their territory. Dravaran wolves regrouped under Kira's direction. The smaller packs who'd joined the fight dispersed quickly, wanting no part of whatever came next. Darien approached while medics were wrapping burns on Alara's hands. "It's done," he said without preamble. "The Coven is defeated. The Alliance ends here." Alara looked up at him, at this man she'd once loved, once believed was her destiny. He looked tired, older, like the weight of leadership had carved lines into his face that hadn't been there a month ago. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for coming, for fighting with us." "I didn't do it for you." Darien's voice was stiff. "I did it for my pack, for the region. Don't mistake tactical alliance for—" "I won't," Alara interrupted. "I know exactly what this was, and I'm grateful anyway." Darien's jaw worked. Behind him, Sarah waited with one hand on her swollen belly, patient and steady. "You got what you wanted," Darien said finally. "Power, recognition, a mate who won't—" He cut himself off. "I hope it was worth it." "It was." Alara met his eyes without flinching. Every moment, every choice, even the parts that hurt. Something flickered in Darien's expression. Regret, maybe, or acknowledgement. Then it was gone, buried beneath the alpha mask he wore so well. "Goodbye, Alara." "Goodbye, Darien." He turned and walked away. Sarah caught Alara's eye as they passed, offered a small nod. Respect, or understanding, or maybe just relief that this chapter was finally closed. Alara watched them go, feeling nothing but a faint echo of what used to be. The pre-bond that had defined 6 years of her life was truly gone now, replaced by something infinitely stronger burning in her chest. "You okay?" Riven appeared beside her, his own hands wrapped in bandages. "Yeah." Alara leaned into him. "I really am." The journey back to Dravaran took 3 days. They moved slowly, hampered by injuries and exhaustion. 27 wolves had died in the battle, 18 from Dravaran, 9 from Silver Peak. Another 40 were wounded badly enough to need carrying. The victory felt hollow in the face of that loss. Alara spent the journey learning names, memorizing faces, asking about families, about mates left behind, about children who'd have to grow up without parents. Every death was a weight she added to her chest, every loss a responsibility she accepted. This was what leadership meant, not just the glory of victory, but the grief of cost. Riven walked beside her most of the way, silent but present. Through the bond, she felt his own grief. For warriors he'd trained, wolves he'd known their whole lives, the price paid for survival. "Does it get easier?" she asked on the second night, lying beside him under stars. "No." His voice was quiet. "You just get better at carrying it." "That's not comforting." "It's not supposed to be." Riven's hand found hers in the darkness. "But you don't carry it alone anymore. That's something." They reached Dravaran at dawn on the 4th day. The fortress looked exactly the same, black stone and iron gates, built into the mountainside, harsh and beautiful. But everything felt different. The warriors who greeted them at the gates looked at Alara with something new in their eyes. Not suspicion, not skepticism, respect. She'd proven herself, not just as Riven's mate or a political alliance, but as their Luna, someone who'd stood on a battlefield and burned down their enemies to save them, someone worth following. The next weeks blurred together in a haze of recovery and rebuilding. Funerals for the fallen, negotiations with the surrendering witches. Some were imprisoned, others were exiled. A handful who'd only joined the coven under duress were released with warnings. Diplomatic communications with other packs, explaining what had happened, establishing new boundaries. And through it all, Alara learned to lead. Kira taught her pack politics, who to trust, who to watch, which families held old grudges, and which were loyal to the bone. Torvon drilled her in combat strategy until she could plan defensive positions in her sleep. Riven showed her the quiet parts of leadership. How to listen, how to see what people weren't saying, how to make decisions that hurt, but were necessary. She made mistakes, dozens of them, trusted the wrong wolf, misjudged a situation, said yes when she should have said no. But she learned, and slowly, carefully, She stopped feeling like an outsider playing at Luna and started feeling like she actually belonged. 6 weeks after the battle, Alara woke to find Riven already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. "What?" she mumbled, still half asleep. "I'm trying to figure out when it happened," Riven said quietly. "When what happened?" "When I stopped being able to imagine my life without you in it." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I know when we bonded, I know when the curse broke, but somewhere between those moments and now, you stopped being a political alliance and became everything?" Alara offered. "Everything," Riven agreed. She kissed him, slow and sweet and tasting like morning and promises. The bond hummed between them, warm and steady, no longer requiring control or distance or fear. "I love you," she said against his mouth. "I know," Riven smiled. "You literally burned down a high priestess to save me. Kind of gave it away." "Shut up." He kissed her again, deeper this time, until they were both breathless and tangled together in sheets that smelled like home. Later, much later, they emerged to find Kira waiting with news. "Silver Peak sent a message," the beta said, handing over a sealed letter. Alara's stomach clenched. She broke the seal, unfolded the parchment, scanned the contents, then laughed. "What?" Riven asked. "Sarah had the baby," Alara said, still reading. "A girl, healthy, they're naming her Elena." She looked up. "Darian says it's not after me, but it's definitely after you," Kira said dryly. "He also says Silver Peak formally recognizes our bond and Dravaran's sovereignty. No more territorial disputes, no more border conflicts." Alara kept reading. "He's proposing a trade agreement, wants to establish regular diplomatic channels." "He's making peace," Riven said slowly. "Actual peace. He's being smart." Alara folded the letter. The Coven proved that old grudges are expensive, that working together is better than dying separately. She looked at Riven. "What do you think?" "I think—" Riven paused, considering. "I think 3 generations of my family fought Silver Peak because that's what we'd always done. Because the hate was inherited, not earned, and maybe it's time to try something different. So we accept? We negotiate." Riven's smile was sharp. "This is still politics. We're not going to roll over and give them everything they want. But, yeah, we work toward peace." It took 3 months to hammer out the trade agreement. 3 months of tense negotiations, careful compromises, and slowly building trust between packs that had been enemies for generations. Darian and Riven maintained professional distance. They'd never be friends, would probably always carry some hostility. But they could be allies, could work together for their pack's benefit. It was enough. Spring arrived while they were finalizing terms, snow melting from the peaks, ice breaking on rivers, green things pushing through frozen ground. The kind of rebirth that felt symbolic in a way that would have been embarrassing if it wasn't so perfectly timed. Alara stood on Dravaran's walls one morning, watching the sun rise over the territory that was truly hers now, and felt something settle in her chest. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of belonging. Luna, a young wolf, approached, barely 16, nervous. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone at the gates asking for you." "Who?" "She says she's your mother." Alara's breath caught. She hadn't seen her mother since the night of her rejection, hadn't spoken to her, hadn't responded to the letters that had arrived sporadically over the past months. Part of her had assumed that door was permanently closed. "Send her to the receiving hall," Alara said quietly. "I'll be there in a moment." She found Riven in their quarters, going over supply reports. "My mother's here," she said without preamble. Riven looked up sharply. "Do you want me to—" "No." Alara took a breath. "I need to do this alone, but stay close in case— I'll be right outside." He crossed to her, pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You don't owe her anything. Remember that." "I know." But knowing and feeling were different things. Alara's mother waited in the receiving hall, older than Alara remembered, grayer, thinner. She stood with her hands clasped in front of her, shoulders tight, eyes red like she'd been crying. "Alara," her voice cracked on the name. "Thank you for seeing me." "What do you want?" Alara kept her voice neutral, gave nothing away. I wanted to... Her mother stopped, started again. I came to apologize. Silence. That night, her mother continued, when Darian rejected you, I should have followed you, should have made sure you were okay. Instead, She swallowed hard. I stayed inside with the pack, with the people who were whispering about you, and I let you walk out alone. You were ashamed of me, Alara said quietly. I was afraid, her mother's voice broke. Afraid of what it meant that the bond had broken. Afraid of what people would say. Afraid that somehow I'd failed you by not... She pressed a hand to her mouth. I was a coward, and I'm sorry. Alara wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at this woman who dressed her like a bride and then abandoned her in the moment it mattered most. But all she felt was tired. I needed you that night, Alara said. I needed my mother to choose me over the pack's opinion, and you didn't. I know. Tears streamed down her mother's face. I know, and I can't take it back, can't undo the hurt, but I'm here now asking... She took a shaking breath. Asking if there's any chance you'd let me try to be better, to be the mother you deserved that night. Alara looked at this woman who'd raised her, taught her, loved her in the way she'd known how. Imperfect, flawed, human in all the worst and best ways. I don't know, Alara said honestly. I'm not the same person I was that night. I've changed. She gestured vaguely at the fortress around them. I've built a completely different life here, and I don't know if there's room in it for... I'm not asking for room, her mother interrupted. I'm just asking for a chance to know who you've become, to see what you've built, to... Her voice dropped to a whisper. To tell you I'm proud of you. The words hit harder than they should have. You're proud? Alara's voice came out sharp. I bonded with your pack's enemy. I fought in a war that killed dozens. I'm everything Silver Peak taught me not to be. You're everything I hoped you'd become, her mother said. Strong, brave, willing to choose yourself even when it cost you everything. She smiled through tears. I wish I'd been brave enough to support you when you needed it most. Alara stood there, throat tight, eyes burning. One dinner, she said finally. You can stay for one dinner, meet Riven properly, see what my life looks like now, and then... She took a breath. Then we'll see. Her mother's face crumpled with relief. Thank you. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Alara said quietly. I'm still angry, still hurt. This doesn't fix anything. I know. Her mother wiped her eyes. But it's a start. The dinner was awkward at first. Stilted conversation, long silences, the weight of unspoken history heavy between them. But slowly, carefully, they found their way to safer topics. Alara talked about learning to lead Dravarine, about the challenges and victories. Her mother shared news from Silver Peak, births, deaths, small pack dramas that felt simultaneously important and meaningless. Riven was perfect, polite without being warm, present without dominating, letting Alara take the lead while offering silent support through the bond. By the time her mother left the next morning, something had shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of a path toward it. That was hard, Riven said, watching the escort disappear into the trees. Yeah, Alara leaned into him. But also necessary, I think. I spent so long being angry at everyone from Silver Peak, at Darian, at my parents, at the pack that watched me leave. And some of that anger was justified, but holding on to all of it was exhausting? Poisonous, Alara corrected. It was making me bitter, making me smaller. I don't want to be defined by what they did to me anymore. What do you want to be defined by? Alara thought about it, really thought, looking out over Dravarin territory with the sun warm on her face and the bond humming steady in her chest. What I built after, she said finally, who I chose to become instead of who they wanted me to be. Riven kissed her temple. I like who you chose. Yeah? Alara smiled. Even when I'm terrifying? Especially then. Summer arrived in waves of heat and long days. Alara continued learning, growing, making Dravarin truly hers. She established new trade routes, modernized old traditions that no longer served, created systems for conflict resolution that didn't rely on might making right. Some wolves resisted. Old guard warriors who wanted things to stay the same, who viewed change as weakness. But more supported her, especially the younger generation, who were tired of isolation and hungry for connection with the wider world. And through it all, Riven stood beside her. Not behind, not in front, but beside. Partners in the truest sense. He challenged her when she was wrong, supported her when she was right, and loved her through both. The bond between them deepened until Elara sometimes couldn't tell where she ended and he began. Not in a loss of self way, but in a completion way. Like they'd each been half finished and together became whole. One night, lying tangled together under stars, Riven asked the question she'd been waiting for. Do you ever regret it? Taking my hand that night? Elara thought about everything that had come after. The pain, the war, the losses, the growth. Thought about the girl in the white dress standing in Silver Peak's courtyard, with her entire future crumbling. No, she said, not even for a second. You? Not even for a second, Riven echoed. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, completely at peace, the curse broken and the war over and the future spreading out before them like an open road. 6 months after the battle, Dravarin held a festival. Not for any particular reason, just to celebrate survival, to honor the fallen, to mark the transition from war to peace, from isolation to connection. Packs from all over the region attended. Even Silver Peak sent a delegation, though Darian himself stayed home with his new daughter. The fortress was decorated, food abundant, music and laughter filling spaces that had been silent for too long. Elara stood on the walls at sunset, watching wolves from former enemy packs dancing together, sharing stories, building friendships that would have been impossible a year ago. You did this, Kira said, appearing beside her. We did this, Elara corrected. All of us. Together. Don't be modest. Kira's smile was genuine. A year ago, Dravarin was dying, isolated, trapped in old grudges, slowly destroying itself from the inside. You changed that. You gave us a future. Riven gave me a choice, Elara said quietly. I just chose to take it. And kept choosing it, every day. Even when it was hard, even when it hurt. Kira's hand landed on her shoulder, brief and firm. That's what makes you Luna. Not the bond, not the magic, the choice to keep showing up. She left Elara alone with the sunset in her thoughts. Riven found her there an hour later as the first stars appeared. Hiding from your own party? He asked. Observing, Elara corrected. There's a difference. Riven wrapped his arms around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? Everything. Elara leaned back into him. How much has changed? How different my life is now compared to what I thought it would be. How... She paused, searching for words. How grateful I am. For all of it. Even the parts that broke me. Because they remade you stronger? Because they taught me I could be remade at all. Elara turned in his arms, facing him. I spent so long thinking I knew exactly who I was, what I wanted, where I belonged, and then it all fell apart and I had to build something new, Riven finished. Build something true, Elara corrected. Something that belonged to me instead of being inherited or expected. And what did you build? Elara looked at him, at this man who'd offered her power instead of pity, challenge instead of comfort, a future that required her to be everything she was capable of becoming. Home, she said simply. I built home. Riven kissed her, deep and slow and tasting like promises. Around them, the festival continued, music drifting up from below. But in this moment, on these walls, it was just the two of them. Two broken people who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful from the ruins. I love you, Riven said against her mouth. More than I thought I was capable of loving anything. More than the curse should have allowed. More than... I know, Elara smiled. I feel it, every day, through the bond and beyond it. Good. His arms tightened. Because you're stuck with me now. For the rest of our lives, however long that is. Promise? Promise. They stood there as night fell completely, as stars filled the sky above Dravarin, as the future stretched out before them, full of possibility and challenge and all the messy, complicated beauty of lives lived on their own terms. Alara thought about the girl she'd been, standing in a white dress, watching her future die, certain she'd never recover. She thought about the choices that had brought her here, crossing enemy borders, accepting impossible odds, learning to burn hot enough to break curses and win wars. She thought about the woman she'd become, scarred and strong and utterly, completely herself. And she realized something that made her chest ache with the weight of truth. She wouldn't change a single moment, not Darian's rejection, not the humiliation, not the pain or the war or the losses that still woke her at night sometimes. Because all of it, every brutal, beautiful, devastating moment had led her here, to this man, this pack, this life she'd built from ashes and spite and love that refused to die. "What are you thinking?" Riven asked quietly. Alara looked up at him, at the gold still burning in his eyes, a permanent reminder of the fire they'd shared, the curse they'd broken, the future they'd claimed together. "I'm thinking," she said, "that sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you turns out to be the best thing, because it destroys who you were supposed to be and makes room for who you actually are." That's very philosophical for someone who once told me to fuck off in 3 different languages. Alara laughed. Genuine, unguarded, free. "I contain multitudes." "You really do." Riven's smile was soft, genuine, completely his. "Terrifying multitudes. And you love me anyway." "And I love you anyway," he agreed. Below them, the festival reached its peak. Wolves from a dozen packs dancing together, celebrating survival, building bridges that would hold long after tonight ended. Alara could see Kira laughing with a Silver Peak warrior, Torvon arm wrestling someone twice his size and losing spectacularly. Children running between adults, playing games that knew no pack boundaries. This was what they'd fought for. Not territory or power or revenge, connection, community, the chance to choose something better than inherited hate. "Come on." Riven took her hand. "Our pack is celebrating. We should be there." "Our pack," Ilar repeated, testing the words. They still felt new, still carried weight. "Our pack," Riven confirmed. "Our territory. Our future." He pulled her toward the stairs. "Come build it with me." And Alara went, willingly, joyfully, completely certain that this was exactly where she belonged. Not because destiny had placed her here, because she'd chosen it. Every day, every moment, every breath. She chose this life, this man, this fierce, complicated, beautiful pack that had given her room to become herself, and she'd keep choosing it for the rest of her life, however long that turned out to be. Years later, when young wolves asked Alara about the night she became Luna, about the rejection, the choice, the war, she would tell them the truth. That sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what you're actually made of. That the worst moments can forge the strongest steel. That love is a choice you make every day, not a destiny that chooses you. And that when someone offers you their hand in the darkness, when they give you a choice between safe and significant, you take it. You take it, and you don't look back. You take it, and you build something worth the cost. You take it, and you become someone who makes taking it worthwhile. That was the lesson Ilara carried. The truth she'd earned in fire and blood and love that refused to be frozen. And standing on Dreverine's walls with Riven's hand in hers and their future spreading out like stars overhead, she knew with absolute certainty she'd made the right choice every single time.